David Rousseau. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you are curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, join me on the Great Range.
Red button. It's live.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're live.
Fancy.
Welcome to another episode of the Gray Range podcast with myself and my official co-host, Lucas Orich, and Stevo Fitchie. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I have no idea why I'm here.
I'm glad you made the trip, man. I'm glad you made the trip.
It's a short 2-hour drive.
Yeah. Well, everybody's time is valuable these days. And to take some time to, spend a couple hours chatting with two dudes about next to nothing, and finding some value in that is I feel pretty good about it. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I've very much enjoyed the podcasts of yours that I watched, like with Jay and
Thank
Earl. They're excellent. Watch the whole thing all the way through, start to finish.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's like what we're trying to do is help people, give a venue to people to tell stories. One of the things is I believe that everybody's story is valid and interesting. We're all, out here living life. We're all trying to get by day to day. And in my experience, when people start talking and telling me about their life, for the most part, it's pretty damned interesting. Like everybody's got some struggle they're going through. Everybody's got passions. Everybody's got, fucking hobbies. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But when people believe in something, when they're invested in it, it's interesting. So part of the reason why I thought about inviting you on the podcast was, when I started down the road with shooting and training and competing and that kind of stuff, you guys up in Peace River were facilitating quite a bit of that, and now you guys are running the mighty Peace 3-Gun League. Mm-hmm. So you guys just did your 3-day Thanksgiving weekend shoot.
Yeah, it was our 11th annual team match.
Okay, 11 years.
Well, 10 years, right? 11 matches in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
October to October, so.
Yeah. That's awesome. So how did that come about? How did you guys decide to start hosting that 3-gun match there, and how did it turn into like a 3-day team match?
Started on a cold winter day in 2004. When these two dum-dums, and by two, I mean Steve and his buddy Greg, and sometimes Byron, I think. Was that in 2004 when you guys would drive down from Peace River to shoot IDPA on Wednesdays?
That was Jason Gass, actually. That
was, it was Jason, yeah, right, that's right.
That wasn't Greg.
Yep.
We would make that terrible trip every 2 weeks. I think we did it for almost 2 years.
It's through 04 and 05, wasn't it? Or 05 and 06.
Yeah, something like that. And then the Wednesday night thing kind of went to the wayside. People work schedules and stuff after that. And I mean, yeah, that's my first introduction into anything other than being a collector of firearms.
Okay.
When I first bought a holster that wasn't some leather flap thing for a 1942 Browning high power.
Some collector piece to add to it.
Yeah. So I started off really good, and I bought a Smith & Wesson 4006, which was, of course, a fantastically terrible choice.
Yeah.
But it looked cool.
It was shiny.
Yeah,
and
those are awesome.
If you wanted to frame a house, it was your gun. It was heavy and solid. So, do you want to go all the way back to the beginning of 3-Gun in Peace River?
I think, yeah.
I'm kind of curious now, when did you start collecting guns? Like, what did the interest start, and when did you start picking that up? Was it something that you got from your dad?
From my dad. My dad was a big collector of English and Commonwealth military firearms.
Oh, okay.
But nothing newer than 1945.
Right, and that's pretty common in Canada for people to collect, or at least it was.
Like I grew up shooting Lee Enfields and Snyders, and Snyder Enfields and Martini Henrys and Martini Enfields.
Okay.
Big 45 caliber brass cartridge that shooting a 600 grain bullet, things like that. Black powder. I grew up doing that and had that interest in collecting. I had my FAC before I had my driver's license. The very first gun I ever bought with my own money was an 8mm Bren gun.
Dang.
Yeah. In like 1986. I was still in high school.
Yep.
16 years old. Walked in, bought it, sell whatever I could buy with a case of ammo, surplus ammo. So,
right.
Case of terrible, terrible Turkish surplus ammo that was.
And did you buy that in Peace River, or was
No,
that
it was in Edmonton?
Millarm?
No, there was a little store called Can Arm.
Oh, okay.
That was before, I don't know, the store that, or the road that P&D's on now.
Right.
That there used to be 3 or 4 gun stores on that street.
Okay.
And the place I bought it from was, I think it was by Northwest 10 Awning, and then they moved later to that street. But you could go to that street, park your car in one place, and hit every kind of gun shop there was.
It was a total dude street.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was great. So, I mean, that's what I wanted. I thought that was cool. You know, it was in English. It was made in Canada. And it was cool.
Do you still have it?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it the top fed magazine, like Ronnie the Bren gun, girl Bren gun?
Exactly. Except
Fantastic.
It's an 8x57 Mauser. It's not in 303.
Right. Okay.
It was a contract made by Inglis, like many of the Browning high powers, for the nationalist Chinese.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
And the nationalist Chinese standard rifle cartridge was 8x57 Mauser because they had bought a lot of stuff from the Germans pre-war.
Okay.
And they actually modeled most of their military on the Germans. So that's what Inglis built them in.
Cool.
So it's, if you look at it, if you know anything about pre-war light machine guns, you'd probably confuse it with a ZB-26 or a ZB-30.
Okay.
That's what it looks like.
Cool.
But it's a brand.
So you started collecting at 16?
Yeah.
And
then bought a few things, bit of a hiatus when I went up north, and collected a few other things. Was interested in that military surplus type stuff.
Right.
And then got hooked up with you guys over in GP.
So what made you, because at the time we were calling it IDPA. We weren't affiliated with IDPA, but we were kind of playing by their playbook, their rule book. And I think that was was it 2004 or 2005?
I want to say 04 or 05. And I was there for a bit before you were.
Sure, yeah.
Remember when you and Robbie came in that first night?
That's right. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And what made you decide to come down and check that out? Like, was it because at the time you were living in Peace River?
Yeah.
I kind of remember meeting you back then. I just remember the persistence with which you guys showed up. We're like, what the fuck are these guys doing here? It's 30 below and there's a storm.
Driving a 1991 Geo Metro that I had bought from a guy at work for $1,000 as my beater car.
Yeah.
So is that the Geo Metro?
The one at the range still, yeah.
The
ones
car
we still use for prop. Yeah. It's
So at the time, obviously the Peace River range was open, but what was the draw to come down? Did you meet somebody or you just heard about the shoots?
I ran into, I don't know if you ever met him or remember him, Dan Reinbold.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so I somehow through gun nuts and playing some online ship game, got to know Dan. And Dan invited me down and I dragged Jason along.
Yeah.
And then it was like, hey, this is kind of fun. It's fun. It's challenging. It's more new people, like-minded people. And there was nothing like that in our area.
Right.
There was nothing active. There was no, it was a range. It wasn't a club. So there was very little organized activity. Certainly nothing in the action variety.
Right.
So we got down there. We got involved. I think Greg came a few times.
Yeah.
And
didn't Byron come a few times too?
Probably did.
But it was sporadic. I just remember.
Me and Jason were the regulars.
That's right.
And we ended up, Greg got interested in sanction stuff. Yeah. So he got, organized some real IDPA at the club. And I think that lasted about a couple of years.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that, I want to say 06, 05, 06, I had started organizing some military surplus rifle shoots.
Yep.
And kind of action rifle, whatever I imagined that to be.
Yep.
Right.
And we did a few of those. And then from there, I have no idea. I can't even remember how I heard of it or what I thought it was, but this 3-gun thing.
Well, I think around that time, so 05, 06, 07 for sure is when we started doing some training classes. We were bringing instructors up, so maybe there was more exposure to different styles of shooting.
Yeah, that was probably 06
that
I took the first class in GP. And we got more interested in, just shooting in general, right?
Sure, because then it wasn't just pistols. We were shooting rifles and shotguns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you had to buy other equipment. And now it's like, okay, what can we do with this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the competitive side of it grew out of a core group of people that were shooting IDPA locally. People we met that were shooting IDPA in Grand Prairie.
Yeah.
You guys here that we had taken classes with. And that sort of formed that core group of people that would come together to what many, many years later would turn into MP3G, Mighty Peace 3 gun. And it was a little bit of a twisted genesis, right? Because we thought 3 gun meant you shot 3 guns in one match.
Right.
Not 3 guns on one stage.
Sure.
That was crazy. Who would do that?
Yeah.
Because coming out of a training background or an IDPA background where everything is scenario based or practical, if you want to look for some term.
Sure. The clock was, it mattered, but it was more about the beep, and we were, cover concealment. We were
doing it in the correct form and
sure.
having, someone who's just broken into your house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And under those types of scenarios that your timer is more about inducing some kind of stress than it is about actually timing the match. Right.
Yeah.
So
it was to induce stress.
Yeah, when you go from training to gaming, it changes a little bit. Just to take it back a little bit. So when you talk about taking classes in Grand Prairie with these guys, were you taking the tactical response stuff when Jaeger was coming up here?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd have to look back at pictures and forms and
I think it was 06. I went through this a while ago, but I believe it was 06 when we started.
I know for sure it was 7 and 8.
Yeah.
I know absolutely it was 7 and 8. I don't know if I was in on any at 6.
Okay.
I suspect, because I'm pretty sure I took classes like 3 or 4 years in a row there.
I'm pretty sure we were all in the same group when it started. So it could be 06, could be 07.
Yeah. So that was my professional training background.
And then it was just kind of that passion for shooting that rolled into, because I know when we started setting up a few pistol matches in Grand Prairie, and then we ran that into, I don't know how many 3-gun competitions we did in Grand Prairie before Mighty Peace 3-gun became a thing. I think we did 1 or 2.
There was a few.
It would have been more than that. MP3G wasn't really a thing until 2016.
Oh, okay.
That's when we decided there was enough going on at other clubs that it would be helpful to have a common rule set.
Sure.
Or at least a common, what's the way to put it? A common philosophy, at least.
Yeah.
Where there was no hard and fast rule set. The match director could always do things differently.
Right.
But generally, most things would be the same.
Sure, and you're scoring things kind of in a linear fashion. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Things like that.
That makes sense.
So, that came about, honestly, because Wes Beland created a Facebook group. And
right.
That's why I had to join Facebook, because he had gone and created this Facebook group.
And Wes has, also known in the Canadian gun community as Westicle, has passed.
He has last year.
Yeah, quite recently. So,
or was it this spring?
To Westicle?
I'll drink to
and
him.
all of his contributions.
Wes was a good man.
Yeah.
He had a heart as big as he was.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever met the man. I conversed with him online quite a bit. I don't know if I ever ran into him at any shoots or competitions.
He came out for a couple of shoots here. Hell of a dude.
I think I remember meeting him one time, but I don't recall.
He had a real
My
passion.
memory's not that great.
A real passion for shooting sports. Like he was a good organizer. Just by what'd you call it? It was just infectious to be around him.
Yeah, very charismatic.
He was so enthusiastic about it. Very charismatic. So,
like, if you had said to him, "I want to show up on Saturday and shoot. Could you help me with some gear?"
Mm-hmm.
Wes would have showed up with a tub of stuff for you, with multiple choices of everything.
Yep.
And said, "Here you go. Do you need ammo too?"
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And you'd have been like, "What can I pay you?" And he would have said nothing, because he just wanted to have people out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the community shooting was important.
Yeah.
But the community, I think, was more important.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that in Peace River. My first course I ever took was tactical responses fighting rifle course in Peace River. And I remember going up to, driving up to Peace River, and I knew Peter Martin was one of the only people I knew that was on that course. and meeting all you guys for the first time. I remember being, totally nervous, not knowing what I was getting myself into with a, CZ 858 and coming away from that experience. Not I wouldn't say, a changed person, but my world was a little bit broader, where I was suddenly like, oh, okay, this is something I can do. These kind of experiences are available to me, meeting these kind of people. And then upon taking subsequent courses with different instructors or different schools that were coming up and teaching, seeing people driving to, Peace River, Northern Alberta, and the only place more backwoods than Peace River is anywhere north of Peace River, and seeing people driving there from Saskatchewan, from Calgary, from Vancouver, from all over Western Canada because of the community, because of the nature of everybody knew that there was going to be great training. It was going to be a good time. It was going to be safe. There was going to be some good people there. And after that, it was like many, many years of these really, really good experiences that you guys put on.
Thanks. I mean, I was involved in a couple of those years. I mean, Mike Rack hosted some courses there as well.
Sure, yeah.
And we had brought Earl there a few times. That was on your podcast there the other night.
Yeah.
We haven't done any probably since, I want to say 14 or 15. We haven't had any classes.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure why. It just kind of sort of fell out of view. But like you touched on the other day, you're talking about how more people are interested in that. So
yeah,
I think we're going to try to get a hold of Earl, and we'll see if we can do something in Peace River next year.
For sure, yeah. He's definitely coming back next year.
Because we've got a good facility there.
It's a fantastic facility. It's probably the best facility that we have in the north right now.
The range in Dawson Creek is pretty darn good.
It is. I guess caveat
nice.
On the Alberta side.
Yeah,
it's the nicest range we have forever. So
yeah, I've certainly enjoyed every training experience I've had, regardless of how cold. And dear God, has it ever been cold?
Well, we've had some terrible cold matches there.
Yeah.
Like we've been very fortunate the last 3 years at the team match, or last 4 years now, because we always run that the first weekend in October.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we've had some matches where it's been 2 or 3 degrees in the day, raining and snowing, with mud and snow and water laying on the ground, and -4 at night. And there's people camping in their tents.
Yep.
And I don't know if were you at the match from hell, Lucas?
I think I'm pretty sure. I just remember being so cold, and everyone's just standing around shaking, and nobody was having a good time. They were having a good time when they were shooting, but
nobody wanted to tap out either.
No.
So normally we run 10 stages per match.
Yeah.
At the team match. And so that's 5 per day. And normally you start shooting at 10, you're done, say 4:30.
Yeah.
Right.
And that day, by 2:15, we had shot 2 stages.
Oh, wow.
And it was so cold, like people are DQing because they're going to pick their shotgun up and it's falling out of their hands.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I was match director and I'm like, we need to stop this. This is getting a little...
The guns are messing up.
Nothing's running.
Everything's
full of mud.
Yeah, it becomes unsafe at a point, right?
My partner falls down and I'm pulling him out of the mud. He's, shotgun's covered in mud and everything's full of mud. And so we cried uncle. We shot 5 matches for the whole match, or 5 stages for the whole match instead of 5. We shot 3 the following day. And that was how bad it can be. I mean, the last 4 years have been fantastic, shorts during the day.
Sure.
Which is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
So I guess we're not paying enough tax to make it cold again.
No.
I guess not. We could always pay more.
Mm-hmm.
I just realized we've been rolling along pretty good. I normally read a piece, and I actually have one picked out to read. So we'll take just a brief segue.
Sure.
And I was looking through this collection of mine to try and find something. For some people, I have a piece picked out where it's kind of jumped into my head, like, oh, that one. This time I didn't. I had a rough idea of subject matter, kind of what kind of a vibe I would like to read through, and I realized that poetry has 2 gears. depressing and really fucking depressing.
And he was having trouble being inspired by you, Steve. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I told you. It wasn't that interesting.
Oh no. We found something pretty good. There's a lot of.
I was just thinking about your text where you're like, man, I'm nervous. Or you didn't come out and say you're nervous. You felt like you were not interesting, but
a little out of my depth.
Yeah.
Okay, we all are.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly. This is that's why I did an open forum podcast and not a subject matter podcast, because I thought that it'd be a lot better just to have organic stories that were told. And man, the world is an interesting place. I haven't been bored in like 4 years. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, wow, what fresh hell is this, right? And it spurs on the writing. There's a lot to write about, but I figured there's a lot to talk about on podcasts too. So, so this piece is called "There's Going to Be a Hot Time." I'm going to deny everything and suppress the hollow threat against me. There are no ordinary ways to claim your way back home. I haven't been back in a while, but I know that all the streets still smell like the old and rotten broken promises, fermented tears and fallow gardens. I'm giving up on you right now so you can escape the insurrection. That which is the same old blood and fire that got us here. The revolution's coming around, and when it does, there's going to be questions. They're going to want to know the details of the inferno, but I will deny everything. I am no cloistered conscience. I am the fly upon the wall, that old telltale sentinel of shit and death. My proboscis burrowed deep into the fetid breath of 1,000 soulless lawyers, feeding on a million bloated bankers. Fat for the fire, so light a candle in the flatulent atmosphere and ignite a beacon of freedom for the poor and desperate. I have no secret knowledge. I just know that the blade moves in a circle, always coming around again, always taking a little off the top, so push yourself up at your peril. This isn't the old grind. This is the final cut, and there's no hiding the bodies. There's no cleaning up the blood. When God comes this time, it's going to be with fire, and I'm going to deny everything.
And I brought that one to mind.
It's more the, I would say it's more the,
I'm not sure.
The sign of the times.
I'm not sure if I should be horrified or honored.
Either or. I'm easy.
I'm good. Either way. Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Well, I kind of thought you're the kind of person that I would have to dig pretty deep to shock. So I figured I'd put out something that maybe would be a little more too dark for someone else. But I thought it spoke well to the kind of the times we're living in right now, where everything seems to be, magnified. Division seems to be magnified. Our celebrities seem faker. Our politicians seem dumber. Our corporations seem more corrupt. Everything seems to be more than it is, and it feels like it's, to a lot of people anyway. Like I said, you get up every day with this feeling of what's next, right? Ever since, it was probably before COVID. I think it was ever since Trump was elected president. Like the bar just got set so high that it was what can happen next.
Like just in the weirdness of life?
In terms of shock value.
Yeah.
Like your daily,
the threshold of what could be possible became so broad, because it was just such a strange notion that this guy who was on, network television firing people from his TV show was going to be the president. And then he became the president. And it just seemed like ever since that has happened, the Overton window of what is absurd or what is totally ludicrous just seems to have opened wide open. And every day we get up and we're like the idea that the U.S. backed failed actor and comedian in basically a coup in Ukraine, and then fed him hundreds of billions of dollars to fight this war, and then tried to convince everybody that it was just a totally normal thing and that we should do this. And I'm not saying we shouldn't oppose Russia, but when you put that dude on the front of it, you watch some of his old TV stuff where he's a comic or an actor and stuff like that, I'm like, it's like putting Ben Stiller in charge of the United States and expecting everybody just to believe it's not a game.
Well, he might be a better choice than Biden.
I think I think a wet washcloth at this point is a better choice than Biden.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you in the fact that there's a new level of surprise every day.
Oh, absolutely.
Where you just, yeah.
I think it's the opposite of that. You're just not surprised anymore.
Sure, I guess that would be the counter.
It's in, like you said, the window is open. The left and the right, the up and the down limits on it have become wider and wider and wider. Mm-hmm. And it become more absurd.
There's certainly less shock value. I guess there's nothing surprising anymore. You've got all these rallies where people are like pro-Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. I don't really care where you land on what side of any of that. But the fact that people are like, cheering that in the streets, and I'm like, should I be shocked?
Oh yeah, the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism that happened in the last month is just kind of bizarre. Like 2 months ago, like nobody would have ever said anything that they're saying now for fear of being canceled.
The left has always tended to the anti-Semitic, though.
Yeah, sure,
always. And because the last 3 or 4 years have given everybody the platform that everything is okay. Mm-hmm. You can say anything you want. You can burn shit in the streets, and no one will do anything.
Right, well, so long as it's dressed up under the right banners.
Precisely. So let's just take that and apply it to the current thing. So the demonstrations for Hamas, things like that.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, what do you mean there's pushback for my actions? Because that doesn't tend to happen to that side. Yeah. When you've got the political establishment and the media establishment behind you, generally speaking, you don't bear any pushback. So I think there's maybe a little bit of surprise from those folks that they came out of the closet and now they can't go back in.
Sure. Yeah.
I think Justin Trudeau. I don't mean to get too far down into current events, but being kind of shouted out of a restaurant recently by pro-Palestinian protesters. He's the kind of guy who would probably say, "Hey, I'm on your side." I think what happens is, and I've said this in conversations before, is the liberal left tends to align itself with what they think of as the disenfranchised, and essentially there's a criminal element that exists on basically anywhere, right? So I always think one of the prime examples is I think it was like 1969 or 1970 that has a thing called the Highwood Festival. It was one of these big hippie rock festivals, and some of the biggest names of the day were there to play, or Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and all that stuff. And they hired the Hells Angels for security, because they didn't like the cops, right? So it's fuck the police, and the same thing you hear today. Well, by the end of the festival, the Hells Angels had committed, rapes, assaults. They drank all the beer, they robbed everybody, they did all the drugs, and basically ran rampant over these hippies who were just there to have a good time. But I see this all the time where I find the liberal left will try to align themselves with an outcast cause, which tends usually to fall into this criminal element, not realizing that they have no control over this violent sociopathic element that they're kind of supplementing society's guardians with. So they're saying, well, we don't want the police. So we'll, you saw it in Seattle with the, what did they have? They had an autonomous zone there. It was taken over by a rapper.
Right. Yeah.
With their tarp that they spread a bag of dirt on, and we're going to grow their own food.
Yes, absolutely. And that devolved into, again, rapes, assaults, robbery very, very quickly. And I think that's what happens. Kind of what we're seeing now is when you open Pandora's box, when you let the genie out, so to speak, they don't want to get put back in. Like, they don't want to go back into. You can't re-marginalize something you've validated. If I say, "Oh, you're not a criminal," society has just, given you a bad shake.
We have the support of the Prime Minister now. It gives your cause legitimacy.
You just stop busing them to events and stop prepositioning pallets of bricks for them is what you do to marginalize them.
Yeah, that would be efficient if you didn't want things destroyed in downtowns. But now that we've gone right off the rails.
That was sideways.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, poetry can be inspiring.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, it did speak to that whole shtick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think you can look at current events and not look at gun ownership as one of these, not necessarily a result, but when people look at current events and they feel unsecure, they're insecure because maybe they're not. They begin to realize that the fabric of society, that thing that keeps them safe, isn't really there. It's very thin.
And they've realized that the state has no obligation to protect them or ability to protect them.
100%.
And may in fact, be actively out to get them.
Or at least putting them in imperiled positions, yeah.
The state only cares about the state. It has to profit.
The state
and it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't have to profit financially. The profits can be in power and control. It doesn't really...
Money, power, and control are all the same things.
Yes.
And that's why the state exists. And its agents exist to enforce the will of the state. There may be incidental societal benefit, but...
Are you telling me it's not roads and hospitals?
We would be fine without that. I can't get a doctor's appointment in Peace River.
Yeah, our healthcare system is...
cannot get one. You cannot book one.
Yeah, not good to say the least.
At 55 years old, I've had cursory work medicals every 2 years for the last whatever, just basically to make sure I don't die in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now I'd like a medical. Can't get one.
Got to come all the way to Grand Prairie or Edmonton.
I don't know. I've never tried to book anything here yet.
Right.
But the thing is, the system as set up has no investment in your continued health.
No.
Or your prosperity or whatever the case may be. The system is...
The system serves the system.
The bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And everybody, I had some family that worked in for Alberta Health for, well over a decade, 14, 15 years. And, they didn't speak about it in terms of efficiencies or corruptions or anything like that. What they would tell me is, well, how was your day at work today? Well, my boss came in and, basically had screwed something up and wanted me to cover it up for them. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because if that happened in the private sector, if somebody had in a supervisory or managerial position had made a serious error and gone to a subordinate and said, hey, you're going to help me hide this, that person would have a lot of leverage, or they could easily be fired, because there's a hierarchy you can go up the chain to. But inside of the bureaucracy, there's no one, because everybody's doing that.
Now, but to its credit, HS or whatever it's about to be rebranded as, if you can get through all the bureaucracy and actually get in to see somebody, the people are fantastic. Like, I just had my shoulder rebuilt in the spring there. Everybody I dealt with through the entire thing was absolutely like a class act of professional, caring person.
The frontline staff are not the system.
They are not, no.
So. The system is what gives them the tools. Make sure that the number of them are there, things like that. But the system does not care.
No, because it took 4 years from the time I started the process just to get a few anchors jammed into this old shoulder. It's not efficient.
My wife recently went through that. It was a multi-year process to get anything done or taken care of.
Yeah. Right.
And it was COVID this, and it was COVID that, and then it was this, and then it was that, and
yeah.
But free healthcare.
Yeah. Well, I don't think a system can be benevolent. I don't think you can. I think a person can, like an individual, can have the best intentions and do everything in their power to to do what they're supposed to do, whatever their mandate is. But if the system itself actively goes against that, if it starts to reward something else other than whatever benevolent, heartfelt, giving, because to get into healthcare, or policing, or anything like that, you got to be the kind of person, I think, who is thinking a little bit more about someone else other than themselves. They'll be seeing a little bit of the big picture. I'm sure there's doctors that are out there that are like, hey, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to be rich.
But I think most people that get into those, like whether cop or doctor or firefighter, nurse, I think they get into that because they want to help people. It's in their nature.
They're seeing
predisposed towards being
some way in which they're time and effort could make the world somewhat of a better place.
But like you said, well, by and large, the people you interact with are excellent.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't ask for better people. It's just, like I said, need to wait on him?
Oh, no, keep going.
Is he okay? Oh, my God.
If we ruin the flow, I'll edit it out, but it hasn't yet.
Don't worry, bro.
A for-profit system isn't perfect.
No.
Like, purely for-profit.
Of course not.
But at least that system has incentive to keeping you alive.
Yep.
Because it cannot make money off of you if you are dead.
Right.
Where in our system...
Hold on.
Wait, you can vote if you're dead, I hear.
Or you can go down the whole medically assisted dying intervention thing and organ harvesting. Like, so there is money to be made when you're dead. So you could go down the rabbit hole, Steve. I'm just saying.
Okay, there is money to be made in whatever. Generally.
It's a dirty world.
Generally, they're going to get more out of you from 40 years of future health care.
Yeah.
Than they will out of parting you out today. So, but in our system, if you are no longer in the system, because you died, you've relieved a burden on the system. You've helped the system. You've freed up resources.
Yes.
Now, whether those resources go to frontline healthcare or to getting nice covering for the chairs in the director's office or whatever the case may be, you have freed up resources. So the system itself is disinclined to actually provide you quality healthcare because there's no benefit.
Yeah. Well, I think that, to take it back to firearms ownership and owning a firearm makes you prepared like owning a guitar makes you a musician. Mm-hmm. But when you start down that road, one of the things that I've always told people is, like you said, the system has no obligation to help you. The police have no obligation to protect you. And the healthcare system has no obligation to keep you healthy. All they can do is treat you after you get sick. So if you work on your own ability to keep yourself secure, so you take some jiu-jitsu courses with Lucas, you go out and not just buy a firearm, but take some training, maybe even compete a little bit so you can get better at what you're doing, so that A, you're safe if you ever have to use a firearm for hunting or God forbid, personal defense, but you're at least not a hazard to yourself and others. And now, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into security, about personal security. But if you start taking steps down that road, you become less of a burden on the system itself. The likelihood of you needing to access resources of the system goes down. Mm-hmm. So, and the same with health, right? If you take care of your health, then you're less likely to use the system, and you become less of a detractor from that system.
And the side of that is that you continue to pay a higher proportion of the system's cost than you get back out of it.
100%.
I mean,
that's
in
the
our
Alberta
system.
Advantage, period.
Yeah. So,
in our system, for sure.
So what you're saying, if you want to use the firearm analogy and preparedness, you think there's a market for home colonoscopy kits. I mean, for guys in their 50s, right? I mean,
sure, there's probably a market.
For it.
Yeah. I mean, I can get like a little, wire cam down at Home Depot, and
Yeah, I mean, what's next?
What right? You're paying for the expertise. You're not paying for the gear. Let's face it.
Yeah. I would rather have the expertise there.
I would rather not call Roto-Rooter. I'd rather be, going to a qualified, somebody with an MD in there.
This is just off the fucking rails.
Well, a plumber may understand the basic concepts and may be prepared to deal with that. They might not be the guy you want in it.
100%.
Definitely not.
Yeah. But I mean, what I was saying is when we start to build resilience into ourselves, we become a little less of I don't really think anybody becomes a burden on the system. The system exists because people exist. Everybody gets sick. Everybody has accidents. You could be the most prepared, healthy person in the world and still get stricken with an ailment or have an accident, or still require the needs of a fire department or a police department. You don't get to pick. But building that resiliency, it does have an effect, a positive effect I think, on society, and also networking inside of a group, as opposed to being reliant upon the bureaucratic structures.
Well, really, yeah, because you're taking personal responsibility and you're saying, that's okay, I'll handle it myself. And the byproduct of that is that the people that are in your peer group or you're surrounded by, they become stronger too, because you become a role model. And I don't mean in a way like, oh, I want to be just like that guy, but you're following a role and you're modeling good behaviors, and other people see that and they pick up the torch or the pitchfork and they do the same thing. And they're like, yeah, like it's inspiring to see people look after themselves.
But if you don't live that and you don't teach it to your kids, no one else will anymore.
Oh no, that is a fact. You're 100% correct.
Personal responsibility is not taught anymore. Look at everything they do. It's all collective guilt.
Yeah.
You know, some whack job does something, so we need to punish everyone.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of.
Yeah.
Like collective guilt, collective responsibility is not the world I want to live in.
Well, no, and we see it in the education system right now. I won't get into very specifics, but the wars of the past, things that happened in this country, I don't feel guilty for it. I wasn't there, and when the system is trying to make my children feel guilty for it, it's like, fuck, they definitely weren't there. So that you shouldn't be brought up in a world where you detest your own existence, where you grow up feeling ashamed and wrong because of things beyond your control.
How else will you accept discriminate treatment towards yourself if you weren't guilty of anything?
Sure.
Yeah. Or an overarching control.
Yeah.
Right. If we can push original sin on you, we can tell you that, what we're going to do as far as limiting your freedom, maybe your freedom of speech, maybe your freedom of movement, maybe your ability to move up and down the class structure, maybe your ability to get educated or access information, maybe your ability to access income streams, access certain media, access healthcare, access law enforcement. If we can start to program these into people and say, not all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I don't think anybody's reading from a new playbook. One of my favorite Bible quotes is, "There's nothing new under the sun," because I don't think anybody's invented anything new in at least the last 2,000 years. Everything seems to just be regurgitated, but then they revise history a little bit so it doesn't look like that's what they were. We're not doing that now. That's not what happened back then. You don't understand.
The last 3 years have been very instructive. Like,
sure,
I've read history since I was a kid. I've always been interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the thoughts I had years ago was, how did someone who was elected with a minority of seats in a certain European government take over?
Sure.
How did that happen? Where were the good people? Well, if you've ever asked yourself that question, look at 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Those good people are your neighbors.
Yep.
And they would have been lined up to clean out your apartment when they hauled you off to somewhere.
Yep. 80% of them in Canada. 80% of people, and I never once put a value judgment on anybody's personal health decisions.
I did.
Not at first.
Oh no, not with regards to that. I thought you meant like.
I mean,
yeah.
in my mind, I'm not a libertarian, but I believe in liberty. I believe in people's ability to choose their own destiny, at least to the extent that we can allow it in an organized and civilized society. But when I talk to people now and they say, well, this societal change will happen, or I see things shifting this way, I say 80% of people in Canada took an untested medical intervention because they were told if they didn't, they would be punished. And that's a really sobering thought. Like, I know there was a lot of people who believe they're doing the right thing, and they're making and they are making an informed decision, and all the power to them. But there was a lot of people who did it so they could go out for dinner. And that is pretty sketchy.
When you give people the choice, but if they don't take you up on that, you take away everything from them. How much of a choice is it really?
Yeah, a lot of those people, it's coercion. They didn't really have a choice.
100% coercion.
It's unfortunate and frustrating too. Because you would always hope that people would have more. I don't say backbone, but
that's exactly what it is.
Stand up for your rights. Like at least
That's exactly what it is.
Fortunately for me, I wasn't put in that situation. I didn't have to, I got COVID like everybody else. It was, wasn't a good time, but it wasn't, I don't want to say I've had worse hangovers, but
for me, it was get it or get fired.
Yeah. And that's the reality that a lot of people are faced with.
Yeah. And I
period. I didn't get it to go to Mexico. I didn't get it to go to the restaurant. Yeah. I got to keep my damn job.
Yeah.
100%.
And if that isn't coercion, I don't know what is. If that isn't morally reprehensible, I don't know what is. And you've got your elected representatives, all of them.
Yeah.
Everyone, yeah.
You've got all of your neighbors screaming for it because they're scared because they've listened to everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't, and not just because I ended up getting it. I didn't want to. It's a terrible thing. But it was that or lose my job.
Yeah.
So I won't fault anyone for it.
Well, no, I think
particularly if you look at people who were believing what the media was. I mean, in the beginning, like you guys touched on before, it's like there was going to be bodies in the street. It was
and to be honest,
that's the way they sold it.
That's what it looked like too, because all the early reports coming out of China, they were
the videos of people just dying on their feet, and
it looked.
Which the more you know about China, the more you know that it was bullshit from the start.
Yeah,
and it was never true because nothing is true in China that you see.
No,
it's all fake.
It's all curated. Everything.
They've got they call them white monkey jobs. Well, they'll hire a podcaster like you.
Yep.
And you go on and you regurgitate state propaganda.
Oh, sure.
And everything they show, like all the beautiful lit up cities like Beijing and Shanghai at night. Then you watch some of these other YouTube channels where they show it during the day.
Yeah.
They're not the same place. I mean, there's one for public consumption, and then there's what the city really looks like.
Yeah.
So anything coming to that country should be taken with a grain of salt.
Well, I come from a tourist town. We used to just call that Alberta tourism.
Yeah.
Right.
But when your elected officials are using that to act against you, what do you do? Yeah.
And again, when you said the last 3 years were very instructional, I agree, because it shows you the depth of depravity that absolutely everybody, there was no checks and balances at all. So you had some individuals that were willing to stand up and they were willing to take the brunt of that. But by and large, all of society complied. It didn't matter whether they were, liberal, conservative, NDP, Green. It didn't matter their political affiliation. It didn't matter. Even look at, everyone's like, pro-union, and I think unions are fucking useless. I don't think we need them anymore. That's another whole discussion. But where were the unions to stand up for the workers too? They were waving the same flag. So even, a union for the workers, by the workers, to protect the workers, there wasn't a single union that stood up and said, holy, wait a second here, let's look into this a little deeper. And these are supposed to be organizations that are grounded in human rights, worker struggles, to make sure that people are treated fairly, equitably, equally, et cetera. And there was none of it, man.
But never for the individual.
No.
Always for the collective.
For the collective.
And that's where it changes when you say, where were the unions? Yeah. I happen to belong to a union that's part of Unifor, much to my shame. So where were the unions? Well, Jerry Diaz, the ex-president of Unifor, was taking kickbacks from
100%
from companies associated with COVID materials.
Yeah.
So why did Unifor have that position?
Yeah.
Well, who knows? But Jerry Diaz ended up out of his job because he was taking money.
Yeah. And they're starting to do a little bit of digging into some of this stuff, the Arrive can, or the Arrive scam thing they're calling now.
Yeah.
I mean, some of this stuff is
Andy Lee's digging into it, and she's a pit bull. It's like, okay, we went to 10 places where these
it's classic. It's classic shell game, money laundering. The same stuff they were doing in the 30s in New York or the 80s, the 70s and 80s in New York with the mob.
What's interesting in Canada though is there's fucking billions missing, and everyone's cool with it. They're like, oh, it's no big deal. What?
Well, it's probably because there's always been billions missing.
Sure.
And it is part of they've beat us down
Yeah.
to the fact that that's expected. And one of the other instructional items, we can't do anything. What are you going to do? Vote for a different party?
It's all the same party.
And in the end,
Yeah.
what difference does it make?
Yeah.
I think if you came again today and said, look, we're going to shut things down unless you get the vax, I'm pretty sure that the numbers taking it would be way lower.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I think the trustworthiness of the governments and the trustworthiness of the media has become far more apparent to the public that it's lower. That
Sure.
They were lying for control. They were doing things that were unnecessary. They were doing things that weren't science. Yeah. And I think a lot more people see that now. So I think the pushback would be a lot harder. The public, the civil disobedience, if you will.
Sure. And I mean, we're working with a whole different data set today than we were 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I did a lot of research. I spent a lot of time reading papers on AstraZeneca, Novavax, Pfizer. I was reading the studies as they were coming out, trying to make an informed decision. And at first, it seemed like, these vaccine studies were heading in the right direction. They weren't there yet. I didn't have faith in it right yet, but I was like, okay, well, I think they're going to get there. I think with the proper amount of experimentation, and they'll figure it out. And at first, I think there was a lot of the unknown was, what's going to be worse for me? If I get COVID, am I going to get really, really sick? And if I get this unknown agent in my body, what's going to happen? Either one was an unknown. It's a game of Russian roulette at the time with the information we had, because I was out there trying to make an informed decision on A, what is COVID, and B, what are these vaccines? And the longer the time went on, instead of the information getting better and more clear and the studies being more accurate and the news about what is COVID becoming more clear,
politicized.
It got more and more muddy. It got harder and harder. I had eventually just stopped because I'm like, I don't believe I can make an informed decision. I have to go with my gut, basically, right? And that's I think what everybody did in the end. I think anybody who is espousing I'm making an informed decision is lying. I think everybody was doing what they thought was in their best interest, be it because A, I got to put food on the table, or B, I want to keep grandma safe, or because I don't trust big pharma, or like
I think for me, like, I got COVID. Okay, it sucked, but it wasn't really any worse than any other flu. And everybody I knew that was getting COVID, everybody was getting it, whether they were vaccinated or unvaccinated. And it seemed like all the arguments were just stupid. It was like people were terrified. It's like, well, why would you be terrified if you believed in it and you got vaccinated? Then why are you afraid of unvaccinated people? Like, isn't it supposed to protect you? Like, it's just
because they were told not to be
right, and they were
told to be scared.
That was the frustrating.
They were told that their vaccine was great.
Yeah,
but it didn't work if you didn't get it.
Right. So then
right.
How is it a vaccine? And
critical thinking, personal responsibility, common sense.
Right. And
non-existent.
Every direction that I turned, it was like, there's no critical thinking. There was no logic to it. So I just kind of it was very frustrating. It was really hard because I was kind of in the same preliminarily doing the same things you were. Mm-hmm. We were chatting back and forth. I was like, well, geez, man, like, which one is the good vaccine? Like, it sounds like this, that one's giving people blood clots and they're dying. That one seems to have this.
Yanking Johnson & Johnson off the market all of a sudden in the middle of this thing. And
right.
Like,
and
what?
We're like, okay.
And I know people that waited specifically for that one because it wasn't actual vaccine.
Well, it's like you got to get on a plane.
Like
There's 3 planes.
Yeah.
And you get on the Johnson & Johnson plane and halfway through the air, like, this plane's not airworthy.
Hey, it's no big deal. Just the engines aren't working.
Yeah, exactly.
But when everything's manipulated, and like you said, when people were lying to themselves or being dishonest, I don't think they were. I think they were, in fact, believing that they were making an informed decision.
100%, yeah.
I mean, or that the reason for doing it was valid enough to them. But like you said, what they were presented with as the facts of the matter were not real.
My ultimate conclusion on all that, and I don't care the decisions that people made, but most people that that I interacted with, when they made the decisions, their decisions were based off of, mainstream media, watching the CBC, CTV, Global, sitting in front of the scare box. And that's where they were getting their information. Anybody who is, not anybody, but a lot of people who are like alternative media, whether it was Twitter, Instagram, whatever, wherever they were getting it, it seems like those people had a different take on things. They were getting their information from a different place. But it seemed like, by and large, the mainstream media was, that's the state propaganda, and they were waving the flag, and people were getting paid.
Well, and so when the media is all on the government's payroll,
yes,
when they're all being subsidized
as they are
by
in
the
Canada.
federal government, when media outlets like like what they've done with Facebook, for example, or where you can't link articles anymore.
Yeah.
Which has turned around and bit the companies pretty bad, because now people aren't going to the CBC's website, but they would read the article on Facebook.
Sure.
So they could at least get ad revenue out of that.
It's actually working out perfectly.
It's working out. It all depends. Were they trying to do it to control your access to information, or are they trying to do it to drive advertising dollars for the individual businesses? Since you don't know what the root reason for it was, you can't say whether it's been successful or not.
I would say it's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. Because it was done under the Canadian content law through the CRTC. But I think that it was done with the idea that if it gives them a little bit more control as a side effect, as a downstream effect, they're controlling a little bit more of the narrative.
Which is what they were looking for. And so that,
I can't assume intentions. It seems to look that way. Like we can say, yes, it was done for Canadian content law, and we want to get revenue going directly to these content creators, and we want to make sure that. But the idea that this administration was going to stand up to Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, and China has done this. China has made deals with these social media conglomerates to become, hey, we're going to have a Facebook China and an Instagram China. But the idea that Canada has that level of stroke, that they're just going to tell them how it is and that's how it's going to be,
it's laughable.
Was so laughable that the initial premise had to be discarded for me right away, because I'm like, there's no way you think that's what just going to tell Mark Zuckerberg that's what's going to happen.
If you look at the history of this particular government, they're not doing anything for the good of the people. It's in some way they were going to benefit from this.
It's for the good of the state and those related to the state.
Yeah,
it's not for the people.
Okay, we're going to promote. It's going to be more Canadian content, et cetera. Those people are going to get paid, and we're going to get the fucking tax money. Like, no matter how you slice it, they had some way, or we're going to control the information. We're going to control what gets said. We're going to decide who sees what. Power control.
Well, Canadian media, it's so good it has to be mandatory.
Yes, as it always has been in Canada. I don't know. I think there's a special place in hell for certain Canadian productions over the years. That being a Canadian kid growing up, and you've got the American channels that are just in the 80s were just killing it with programming.
Yeah,
some of the best television ever made. And then you'd switch to the Canadian networks. And the best we could do was like Beachcombers.
Oh, dude, The Littlest Hobo.
And The Littlest Hobo. That
what
dog
else
has
could you
has more Canadian media backing than most actors, right? We grew up with this absolute cesspool of media, and now it's not much better. The Canadian stuff, it's like a sad shade of like B-level American television. So you've got like your top tiers like your ABC and your NBC, and then you've got like the CW and smaller television networks, and Canadian networks kind of try to compete to be B-level.
Given Trudeau's statements about Canada being the first post-national state and having no identity and having nothing that makes it unique and or different, why does the CRTC exist? If there is nothing unique, special, or different about anything in this country or anyone in this country, why does the CRTC exist? to promote Canadian content, but you hate Canadian content.
We
you
don't,
said it. You said it's of no value.
Yeah. We don't
Why
even know
are
what
you promoting
it is.
it.
I guess all it is it's produced in this country. That's the only thing that makes it Canadian.
Sure, I mean,
but there's no values attached to it because we don't know what those are anymore.
No, but well, there are none. Canada, you have no value. There's nothing to being Canadian anymore, according to him.
Yeah,
I disagree on that personally.
Same.
But according to him, the CRTC is a completely worthless organization. Yet he continues to use it to exert more control over the peasants.
Right. It becomes your ministry of truth.
You are a subject of the crown.
Yeah.
You have no rights. The charter is a list of maybes and mights. And if they feel like it, you can have some of the things from the list. If they don't feel like it, it doesn't mean anything. Look at the first two sentences in it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a worthless piece of paper.
Yeah. Well, I think any gun owner in Canada is going to have to agree with you because if there's a gun owner in Canada that still believes that they have any sort of property rights,
which you don't.
Yeah. Then, you'd have to be ignoring all signs to the contrary. Because when your government can essentially decree that, and not just saying that, your property is illegal, because what that does is saying you are now a criminal at the behest of the state overnight. So we're not going to arrest you yet, but it's coming.
You're on notice.
Yeah, you're on notice. You're now a criminal.
Well, that's what the criminal code says. Yep. Unless you have your get out of jail license.
Yeah.
You are
It's criminal. A suspension of criminal activity.
Exactly.
100%. Yeah, because firearms ownership is not permitted in Canada.
Correct.
It is illegal to have a firearm in Canada, period. And there is a bureaucratic highway by which you can acquire this property. But by doing so, you abdicate a whole lot of rights, which I think that most people don't really understand. It's like they go to get their driver's license and then they can, you can go and buy the car without the driver's license, right? You can go buy a car. You can even drive it. If you've got property, you can drive it all over Hell's Half Acre if you own Hell's Half Acre. But you don't abdicate your civil rights when you get a driver's license. But you sure do when you get a firearms license. You abdicate a whole host of them. Unlawful search and seizure. I believe the right to
not self-incriminate. You have to help them toss your house.
Right. Yeah, you can't deny them access to your home if they show up for
if they've made an
subsidized
and you cannot,
inspection.
You cannot not help them go through your stuff.
Yeah, which is, I don't think a lot of people understand that the licensing process isn't a licensing process. It's one giant red flag law is what it is.
The unfortunate part of all of this is that the rest of the country doesn't see the canary in a coal mine that happens to be.
Yep.
And they don't make the connection between making gun A illegal and saying, Dave, you really shouldn't have a microphone like this. You might spread some propaganda.
Yep.
It's the exact same item.
100%.
See, there's no difference. Because when you look at the Firearms Act in general, it's completely unnecessary. Mm-hmm. There is no Baseball Bat Act.
Right.
But if you do something illegal, if you commit an offense with a baseball bat, you will be punished. There is no... it's unnecessary in its control. Mm-hmm. Simply to control items. Because the ideology of those in charge say, you need to be a subject. You can't be a citizen.
Well, yeah, when you're a subject, you can't be too free, right?
No, you can't be free at all.
Yeah, you have to be controlled.
Like I said, it's the charter is a list of maybes and mights.
Yeah. Which we saw with the trucker convoy, right? It's like, well, let's just tear this piece of paper up.
And what we saw with any of the COVID controls.
For sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So
Canada has a long history of doing this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of cool stuff that's illegal in Canada. The firecrackers. Like I can go down and I can buy a whole host of fireworks, small munition, explosives, and do with them what I please. But a firecracker, like it's, you've got I can't remember what they're called, the ones you throw on the ground and they pop. You can buy those.
Yep.
And you can buy a rocket
that sets a firecracker off up in the sky.
Yeah, but you can't buy the firecracker because of media-led fear that some kid's going to blow his fingers off. And some kid probably did blow his fingers off. Like,
sure.
Let's
and
admit
people
it.
do that every year with
100%.
With the commercially available fireworks.
I literally did watch a buddy of mine try and light a firecracker, which was probably illegal at the time, back in like junior high school, with about 1/10 of a millimeter of fuse left on it. And he got it lit. And he didn't lose his fingers, but yeah, there was an injury.
It was close.
Yeah, it was fun. We laughed.
Yeah, but for every failure like that, David, you have to realize the social benefit of the nunchuck ban. I mean, there are no drive-by.
Or the throwing star
There are
ban.
no drive-by nunchuckings. There hasn't been in a very long time. So that was 100% successful.
Well, all of the ninja weapons are illegal.
Yeah, shuriken. Ooh, man. Throwing
You
stars.
could break the skin, cause an infection.
So that leads me to believe that at one point in Canadian judicial history, there was enough hysteria around ninjas for a judge, probably a Senate subcommittee, to sit down and look at a copy of Black Belt magazine with Stephen K. Hayes on the cover, and look at the back pages and go, smoke bombs, blow guns, not in my country, and ban the whole lot. Which leads me to believe that we're governed by idiots at this point.
Sure.
I don't think you'll get any argument from anybody sitting here.
Yeah.
I am going to rep my hood, though. Ninjas are dangerous.
100%.
And deadly. So,
yes. Agreed.
I mean, just think of how much more deadly they would be with access to shurikens.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no telling what that would unleash.
Carnage.
Yeah. We just have this long history in Canada of banning certain items based on media hysteria.
Well, sure. And we saw it in the OIC in 2020, where, they essentially copied and pasted pages and pages and pages of things to ban. There was coffee companies that got banned. There was a gunsmith who got banned. There was all kinds of weird shit that just got copied and pasted into these documents, these omnibus bills that nobody reads. And then when you started looking through the fine print, like, okay, they banned. It was just ridiculous. The amount of things that were banned,
but
that weren't even guns.
Canada's safer now that I can't now that I can't buy a 100 millimeter anti-tank gun.
It's true.
I mean,
yes,
which you didn't have access to begin with.
No, but
not legally.
But now I can't. Yeah. No,
it's true.
Got a whole container of them coming in through Vancouver, right? Like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, yeah, I think that it remains to be said that they didn't ban all the guns; they banned some of the guns. And why didn't they roll through now these mass confiscations stuff? So, is it unfeasible to enforce the legislation? Do they know they can't do it? Is it the mere logistics of it? Or do they know that there's another election coming? And if they were to solve the gun issue, quote unquote, what would they campaign on next year?
They didn't ban everything because, like, this is the fourth time now I've gone through this sort of thing. Because they're incompetent. It's the same reason that back in 1990, when they looked through the 1989 issue of Guns Digest and made up their list, the former prohibited weapons order list that included everything scary from that Guns Digest. Well, it didn't get the Mini 14, which was the cause of it all, because in that book, it had a flush magazine and a woodstock. And nothing 100%, nothing with a flush magazine or woodstock got prohibited. So why did all this other stuff get through? Because they're dumb. Why did they miss this last bunch? Because they're getting smarter. But they're still dumb. They'll get there.
Oh, yeah.
But now they're going to be running into the civil disobedience problem.
As did New Zealand.
As did Canada in 1995. because
right.
in 1995, the government said there was 2 million gun owners in Canada and 7 million guns. The lowest other estimates from any of the other organizations like the NFA or CSSA or from, import records, stuff like that, said there was 4 million gun owners and between 14 and 21 million guns.
Okay.
So you look at 1995, 50% of the gun owners said no thank you, and 50% of the guns or more didn't get registered.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen this time?
The same thing.
Except more
because it's scaled up.
People that didn't register guns in 1995 did it because they felt the government was annoying them. People's reasons have changed somewhat in the last few years for being firearms owners.
Mm-hmm.
That changes your outcome with more bans and whatnot significantly. So then why haven't they confiscated them? Maybe they are aware enough that they're not going to get enough compliance and they'll look like failures. Or maybe they just can't make it happen.
I don't think
they're
they
incompetent.
I think it's incompetence for sure, but you can't. When they talk about doing a buyback, we've reached the end game as far as how much money they can print. They simply don't have the money. And nobody would, you know what I mean? Like they can manufacture it, but the idea of a buyback, it's like, okay, like who's going to manage that program? They have no idea what's out there. Like it's a farce.
SNC-Lavalin, Bombardier?
Sure.
Yeah. And they're good at taking government
And then
money.
the idea that there would be a door-to-door confiscation thing, you're like, well, who's going to manage that program?
That's physically impossible.
And at what cost?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Eventually it becomes logistically impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were going to, the U.S. government, the U.S. military, in all its might, the most technologically advanced, largest military on earth, could not disarm Afghanistan. Right?
Yeah, it's just not a realistic thing.
Yeah, and they had all the reasons to disarm Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think they know that it can't be done. They're relying on propaganda and fear.
Well, I think
push people
Canadians are generally, although we have a history of civil disobedience, Canadians are generally speaking, they're law-abiding and they do what they're told. So you look at case in point after the OIC, when everything gets banned, everyone has to, you can keep it at home in your safe, you can look at it, and that's it. What have Canadians done? They kept them at home in their safe and they look at it. And that's it. Like people generally, if you're told to do something, you do it. That's a Canadian thing. Same thing. Okay, 80% of people went and got the jab because that's what they thought they had to do, or they were coerced into it.
They did it because they thought they'd be punished.
Right.
Like the people in the stores, most of them weren't wearing masks because they felt it was valuable.
Right. They thought they
didn't want to get punished.
Be a repercussion. It's the same thing with firearms, that everyone's like, well, geez, I don't want to. The reality with firearms, like, if you went into a store and you weren't wearing your mask and some guy started yelling at you, I mean, you could punch him in the face, tell him to fuck off. It wouldn't really matter. There's no real repercussion. Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. People just did it out of that kind of civil, civility, period. Yep. The difference is with your gun, if you decide to, your gun got banned and you decide that you're going to take that gun out somewhere. If you get caught, you're losing all of your shit. You're going to have a lifetime firearms prohibition. You're going to lose your license. And there's all this, there's a lot at stake. So people will simply
it's
obey.
the degree of the punishment, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. The Papa government's going to take away your Xbox. Yeah. Right. That's the thing. The government can do this where they can, quote unquote, extend you privileges, even if they are, in a lot of people's eyes, God-given rights. Yep. They'll say, we're going to extend you this privilege. Now you're under the scrutiny of the Canadian Criminal Code. And if you break the law, or we decide arbitrarily you have contravened this giant chunk of legalese legislation, we will take all that and put you in jail, consequently.
Did you guys catch the notes from the UCP convention where they passed all the resolutions except number 19, whatever the last one, I don't remember what that one was about, but there was a resolution in there specifically that said that they would recognize the right to keep arms in Alberta. Do you guys hear anything about that?
No.
Okay, I'll have to dig it up. We'll have to explore that in a discussion later. I just thought it was interesting wording, but it passed at the convention. So I just wonder if Alberta is kind of with Dr. Bryant in charge as the CFO. I wonder if they'd be looking at, somewhere along the way, hey, look, you checked all the boxes ahead of time. You were legally allowed to use this thing at the range, and I wonder if we'll see a return to that in Alberta. Steve, from your perspective, is there any hope going forward as far as firearms?
I think all it takes is a letter from the Solicitor General to the law enforcement agencies in this country saying, we are not going to prosecute any of these offenses. If you see someone shooting their AR-15 at the range and they're doing nothing else wrong, we're not going to prosecute it, so don't bother.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then maybe you might take a chance on that. Maybe you wouldn't, because it's still not against the law.
Right.
It's just like in BC where you can buy coke on the street.
Yeah, much like they've done with drug legislation.
Sure. Yeah. So to say we can't do this in Alberta is patently false, because they're doing it in BC with criminal drugs, hard drugs that hurt far more people than legally owned firearms in this country.
Yeah.
So it's something that can be done. We haven't seen that. With respect to what the CFO can do specifically, you don't have any 12.3s, 12.4s, 12.5s, or any of that.
I don't know.
Okay. No. So you used to be able to get, for anybody that doesn't know, those are converted autos and guns from a couple classes like Galils, FALs, Uzis, all semi-automatics.
Right.
You used to be able to get something called special authority to possess, which was an ATT for an authorization to transport for these prohibited class firearms.
And you could still take those to the range.
Yeah. See, and that's what they did in 95. They said, look, or in 90, they said, well, you can apply for this thing. You can still use your guns. We're not bringing any more in the country. You can't sell them to anybody that doesn't own any, but you can still use them.
Right.
So you used to be able to apply for the SAP, and then you could take your guns to the range. And then they got rid of that for public safety reasons. And so at that moment, if you had a Chinese M14, you could take it to the range or shoot it anywhere. But if you had a converted auto M14, you couldn't shoot it anywhere.
Right.
And they were exactly the same.
Right. Yeah.
Identical. So with the SAP, that used to be issued at the CFO level. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and this has happened a while ago, but when some of the stuff that they've added in recently is they've removed the ability for the provincial CFO to issue a SAP.
Of course.
That's got to be issued at the federal level. So Dr. Bryant can't just go ahead and say, you know what, people in Alberta are trustworthy. I'm going to start issuing these again.
Okay. Because
they've changed that. So I feel, given the desire for control from the feds, that if there was anything the CFOs were starting to do that annoyed the feds, let's say she started issuing authorizations to carry.
Yeah.
For 60% of the people that asked for them, not just ones that had 3 attempts on their life or whatever the standard is.
Or happened to be a lawyer or a judge in Ottawa.
Exactly. Let's say she just started issuing them to people that were like me and you, law-abiding, good citizens, no criminal history, nothing. I kind of feel something like that would probably disappear pretty quick into the federal bowels.
They would remove that power from the...
Yeah. So what the CFO can do and what the Alberta government can do are two different things.
Right.
Because the Alberta government ultimately is the one that's prosecuting you for any offense. So it's kind of up to them.
Yeah. Do you think, are you hopeful politically? Again, I work in the industry, so I talk with people all day, and everyone's like, well, when Poilievre gets in, things are going to change. We're going to get our handguns back, and we're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to do that. From your perspective, just based on, this is the 4th time you've been through this shit. Do you, if he does get elected, and again, I don't want to, regardless of how people vote, I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but are you hopeful at all that if Poilievre gets in, that we would see a restoration of what was taken from, from law-abiding people,
our legally owned property that we're no longer able to use?
Right. Are you, and even the handgun freeze, like that whole thing, are you? Is there any piece of you at all that has any hope that we would see a return to? We'll call it pre-COVID, the before times.
Return to what it was in 2019?
Yeah. Or do you think it's a political death, like at this bomb that he's not gonna fucking...
No, it's not a political death warrant, because they could do it, let's assume. Now, you're assuming the Conservatives win a majority.
Sure. Let's the
only way you can entertain
let's preface
any
it with
changes.
that. Let's say that the polls can be believed. The Conservatives get their super majority. The Liberals die or whatever. Cool. And the NDP is the official opposition, or in this case, maybe it's even the Bloc. Who cares? But the supermajority has the power to pass these laws. Yes. Are you hopeful that in that narrowly defined set of parameters, do you think they'd do anything, or do you think that they are not interested in, again, because to me they're all the same party anyways, and they're not interested in giving control back to people?
Poilievre talks the talk.
Yeah.
The difference is, are you going to hold it over people for the next election? Oh, sorry, we didn't get to this. But if you vote and donate again this time, then next time we promise we'll get to it. So since 1990, even through the Harper years, nothing has come back to us on anything other than a financial point of view. The long gun registry went away because it was expensive.
Well, it was the $1 billion boondoggle.
Correct.
And $1 billion back then was a lot of money. Now billions are like, well, didn't we just give that to Ukraine last week?
We printed that yesterday.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with property rights. It had nothing to do with individual freedom. It had nothing to do with anything other than we're making a fiscal standpoint.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, it changed nothing because gun control laws in this country don't make anything safer.
No, but
I think he control the criminals.
Sorry, I think Stephen Harper had a little bit of cachet with that because the Prime Minister or the Conservatives in New Zealand had just rolled back similar legislation. I think like 2 or 3 years prior, or maybe even a year prior. So I think he had some precedence where he could look and say, hey, look, another Commonwealth nation has moved in this direction, as far as their legislation goes. We can just let this thing go, and it's not going to cost us a whole bunch of votes on
no, and I'm sure it
in
didn't.
Eastern Canada.
I'm sure it didn't either, but that was the sole thing that's changed since 1990. That's
right.
The only thing that's gotten less controlling or less onerous since 1990.
Well, do any nations roll back gun control legislation?
That's irrelevant because it's Canada.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, whatever happened in Poland is not relevant to the Canadian discussion.
No, I just see so I remember when I traveled into Spain, I remember looking at some of their firearms legislation and then reading it and being like, oh, it looks really similar to some other European legislation I've seen. And then seeing, okay, lots of these countries have really, really similar, if not identical, legislation. And then going a little deeper and finding out, oh, okay, so there's a United Nations, I don't know what they call United Nations decrees, movements, bills, whatever, that basically advises these nations on what their gun control.
It's a roadmap to civil disarmament.
100%. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think we see internationally any rollbacks in these kind of things. That's why it was unique in New Zealand. I think it was unique in Canada that they did roll back any kind of legislation.
But we do see a lot of countries that are much more socialist than us, where you can own a lot more things.
Sure.
Where you've actually got that firearms license, you've got that certification from your government, and they go, okay, David's a good guy now.
Yeah.
Yes, feel free to go buy that machine gun.
Yep.
And if you don't use a suppressor, you're a bad neighbor. Right?
God bless them.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of places like that where they're more regulated than us even, which is hard to imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they have the ability, because they're trusted, they've got the piece of paper to own more things. So, like, I mean, what that firearms license that you have should be worth more than it is.
Sure.
But they've chosen to go down that route to civilian disarmament, which is where the goal is, for ideological reasons, because there's no public safety reasons to justify it. It won't take guns out of criminal hands. They're reducing the penalties on criminals. They're lowering the penalties for crimes with guns or from criminals.
Yeah. That should be the indicator
that should be what you do first.
Well, there's no good faith in the legislation. If I'm going to say that these firearms are the biggest ill in society, and then say, but if you commit a crime with one, it's okay. It's not so bad.
When they stopped issuing the SAPs, what that said to people was the government will not deal with you in good faith.
Right.
Sure.
We got you to register these guns. with the promise that you would continue to be able to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, sorry.
So hopeful, yes or no?
On a percentage number?
I mean, yeah, that's the answer I'd expect out of you, some rational percentage number. What's your?
I am so cynical, Lucas.
I know that's why I'm asking you. Like, are you buying into the? I don't want to say buying into the hype, but like people have this infectious belief, and I don't know if it's because they've been downtrodden and fucked for so long now, where they're like, okay, there's this faint glimmer of hope on the horizon where somebody seems like they're speaking a little bit more sense than the other guy, and so they're building it into something that's not going to be. But do you think? Yeah, a yes or no question. You can put percentages on you want, but are you hopeful to a return to like the 2019?
No.
Like, no. Okay.
Me neither. It could happen.
Yeah,
it could happen. I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you. I think like I said, the world in my mind, like there's a cosmic consciousness, the group mindset. Things started to change in the world. Like I said, maybe it was the time Trump was elected. Maybe it was COVID. But things started to happen, say 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Where it became really, really evident that there was people in power, be it political power, be it corporate power, be it, large multinational, European groups, that they had some kind of designs on the books. There was something sitting there previously. They're like, we're just waiting for the right moment to roll all this shit out.
There's accelerationists on both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's accelerationists on the control side. There's accelerationists on the peasant side.
The freedom side.
Like, let's get it on. Let's get it over with. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I think what that showed was that faction in the powers that be decided they were going to start ramping things up.
Yeah. We should pause there. We got to move this. We got to move that camera.
This one up here?
No, the top one, because I'm sitting right beside. Like, you won't see me in the wide angle through all this. I'm sitting behind this boom.
Oh, I got you.
Okay. And I'm going to take a leak. I think we're looking good now. How's that? That's better, eh? We can all see the
squint hard.
Squint. The thankless editing job that Dave's gonna have to do now. Fuck, eh?
All right, we're back from our little break. We left off
with our hopefulness for the future government of Canada.
Right, hope in the government. Yes.
Yes.
I don't think I've had quite enough beer to get to hope in the government. We'll get there.
When has a government ever let us down?
Well, aside from all the time. I don't know.
I'll just be quiet.
I think we can segue into. I guess kind of the question is, have you seen the interest in the shooting sports wane at all with all this new legislation?
Absolutely. It became like we lost a lot of regular people.
Yeah,
because they had an AR-15.
Sure, and then they also had the one of the biggest things that changes from the industry side was semi-auto shotguns were making a huge, like, man, if you weren't running a mag-fed shotgun, you were no longer going to be able to be
in open
class, right?
And
it's just the times were getting ridiculous, and the advances in the guns and the technology, the stuff that was coming out was so cool, and people were like, okay, I'm going to sell these 3 things. I'm going to work a bunch of overtime, and I'm going to get this dream gun so I can compete. And so after having the AR-15, first it was one thing gets banned, so you jump ship, you start down a new road.
Yep.
That thing gets banned. And I think it just took the wind out of a lot of people's sails, where you went from, being competitive, but you keep getting fucked every time you turn around and try and improve your game and be a better competitor. The government is out to, I don't want to say they're out to get you, but in a nutshell, they're shutting you down.
They're ruining your day.
Yeah, they're ruining your day, and it's really hard then to. So, if I had my AR-15 and my mag-fed shotgun, and they both got banned, now they're prohibited, and I'm not allowed to take them outside anymore because they're dangerous.
But it's not too dangerous to not let you keep for 5 years at your house.
Right. And then
Yes.
the threat of more bans coming, and you're like, well, fuck, like if I still want to compete, what am I supposed to buy? How am I supposed to compete?
Yeah.
And I can't even trade this stuff in and get something new. I'm
Right.
stuck with it. So now the capital that I have invested is stuck. They've frozen my assets.
Yeah.
I'm a fucking dirty trucker now. My bank account is frozen. I can no longer access my assets. So I can't even play the game anymore. And
Sure.
so how do you, I'm going to buy something else and they're going to turn around and ban that. So I think people, rightly so, are cynical about it. And because sales wise, from the industry side, people are like, yeah, fuck it, I'm out.
That was very
They're
much
just-
present in that first year.
Yeah.
Like we were actually running divisions to allow people to shoot pistol and shotgun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if there was stuff you couldn't hit because it was 83 yards away, then those guys didn't have to shoot it.
Yeah.
So we were letting them shoot whatever you could shoot with those two guns.
Yeah.
A year later, those people came back with some other long gun. But we also started permitting 22s,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
we had never permitted before.
Right.
And PCCs.
PCCs had been a thing previously,
Okay.
but because we weren't designing any courses of fire at any of the clubs that were specific or unique to PCCs, you'd go here, you'd in Peace River, you'd be in Dawson Creek or Fort St. John, you'd have to make a 230-yard shot with your PCC. Oof. So you'd shoot one at it and drive on.
Yeah.
But once we lost the ARs,
Mm-hmm.
there are still some 223 semi-auto options out there, but we started getting way more 22s, way more PCCs. So in effect, we brought everything in.
PCCs is pistol caliber carbines for anybody listening who doesn't know what the fuck we're talking about.
And
9mm guns.
For somebody who's spent a lot of time around firearms, what are your thoughts on pistol caliber carbines? Like kind of as a rule, so they're kind of controversial in some sets. Some people view them as an answer to a question no one asked. And I know if you look at the original Colts. And then they moved into subguns like your MP5. So operationally and tactically, they did have a place at some point, less so now. But there's a huge boom in the civilian market on pistol caliber carbines.
There has to be. There's nothing else left.
Well, it all
even in the U.S.
It all depends on what you're doing with it.
Sure.
If you live in Texas, where there's no question about you having the right to defend yourself and being able to own the tools to do with it, is it the best option? Probably not. If you want to take your kids and your wife shooting and you don't want them deafened,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't want to spend twice as much on ammo, or you just want to go plinking with it, they're great. Like from a competition perspective, they do make setting up stages a little bit harder, although they do allow a lot of things that you can't do with a rifle.
Yeah.
I can't shoot a steel plate at 15 yards on the ground with a 223.
Right.
No,
It's unsafe.
Yeah.
And it'll play hell with the targets. But with my PCC, so we can set up stages now where a lot of the targets are optional for the shooters.
Mm-hmm.
You want to shoot that Texas Star with your PCC? Have at her. So in some ways, it's almost I don't hesitate to say this, a better competition gun from some angles because you've got a little more flexibility.
Yeah.
From a stage design and from a shooter perspective sometimes.
Yep.
From a safety officer perspective, where you got a squad of 12 people and you're standing there beside them, 10 of them with your timer all day. I really like shooting beside PCCs.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I don't end up with TBI at the end of the day.
Yeah. And even for us doing the non-restricted carbine classes, we've seen about a 50-50 split between pistol caliber carbines and traditional 5.56, 7.62 by 39 guns.
Yeah.
And the 9mm, the guys are crushing it. I think there's a fantastic, what would you call it? I don't want to say niche market for it, but as for a training tool, they're great, man, because the recoil's not there. Not that there's a great amount in the intermediate cartridges, but you can teach somebody to shoot a 9mm rifle really easily, and they can achieve great success quickly. Like
for lower cost,
lower noise, and the same thing you talk about the TBI factor. Standing beside all the 5.56 guns with brakes.
Yep.
All the 9mm guns with brakes. So what?
Like we used to have all those 12.5 or 14.5 inch ARs.
guilty.
Yeah, exactly. Because we shot to 200 meters typically, not a whole lot farther. So that gun was perfectly fine for shooting steel that distance. And I'd end up with my lips wrapped around my teeth.
Yeah.
And my mouth open sometimes, and my hand with the timer up over the guy's shoulder.
Yeah.
Because some of those breaks were so obnoxious.
Yeah.
That you just couldn't stand off to the side. Like, I mean, to the shooter, it's not so bad.
No, because when you're directly behind it, they're excellent.
But when you're standing, a foot off to the side where you can be close enough to safety officer properly, they're miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a couple of us that started shooting PCCs kind of at the same time, me and JP from Fort St. John.
Yep.
And oh my God, did we get mocked mercilessly. Because it's like, are those guys even shooting? I can't even hear their gun go off. And we actually ran into some issues initially with the guys holding the timer with the PCCs, because they're just a lot quieter.
Yeah.
Especially if you're shooting something like with a 147 grain out of them, and they're not necessarily supersonic.
Yep.
So there isn't even the crack with it.
Yeah.
And after, actually, it started to gain some traction amongst other guys because people realized just how pleasant they were to be around.
Sure, and you can rock it. You can shoot it fast and accurate.
I can shoot my AR fast.
Well, yes.
A well set up AR, a well balanced AR with a break on it.
Some of the new PCCs, though, I don't know if you've got your hands on one of the Ravens.
No, I haven't.
Man,
are they blowback or DI?
Blowback in the 9mm. They're DI in the 5.56.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because it's kind of a convertible gun, but man, if you want to run one, I'll lend you mine if you want to play with one. But
I had an FX9 for a while. That thing was miserable until I spent about
this
months and
this thing works. Bucks. This thing's been handed to so many people through our classes. It's probably got 5,000 or 6,000 rounds through it now. What a fantastic thing to drive!
Really?
It's kind of a next level PCC.
Okay.
Ben Click just dropped a really nice range report.
Okay.
On the 223 gun.
Yeah.
I think just yesterday morning. Ben Click is a very meticulous former Canadian Forces sharpshooter, and a really nice write-up on it.
Sierra 64 riflecraft.
Yes, Sierra 64, and absolutely really good write-up on it. Said had nothing but high praise for it, which is a lot coming from him. So.
Well, it's a lot considering it's a Canadian-made gun too.
It is, Usually Canadian-made stuff leaves a bad taste in our mouth.
Made in Canada right now is not exactly a glowing endorsement.
Fantastic boat anchors, though.
Yeah. Well, if you look at them all, if you could put them all together and pick this feature and get rid of that feature and go with this, you could make a proper gun out of them. We're talking about all the 180 variants, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could make a proper gun if you got rid of this and put these together. But some of their choices are nonsensical.
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say that the Raven kind of checks all the boxes. I think it's the best of what's been made.
Well, you and I know why that is. Yeah. The internal geometry of that is not a 180.
It is not.
And other than that length, it's a proven design.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It changed.
And the controls are right where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, nothing feels more appropriate than that.
And the next generation coming out with the Ford Assist on it is going to be like, okay, cool. Back to where I started. Just longer. Perfect.
That's what she said.
No, she didn't.
Yeah, never come back with longer. Might be short, but it sure is thin.
Yeah, wow.
Once again, sideways.
Yeah.
No, I think, honestly, for competition, they're great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at some of them kick quite a bit. The 9mm PC carbines.
Yeah.
Due to buffer weight, spring tension, stuff like that.
Sure.
But they don't scare people the way a braked 14.5-inch AR did.
Yep.
That way more pleasant to shoot than the AR. But so loud
they
that
felt
it
pretty
turned
good.
a lot of people off.
Yep.
Where you can have that little more recoil with a 9mm, for example, and people like it better just because it's quieter.
And for teaching new shooters too, they're just, it's so easy to teach them.
Yeah.
When they're shooting a 9mm rifle.
And unlike a 22, it actually does something.
It does.
There's more noise. Yeah. There's some recoil.
Yeah. Well, your manual of arms for the most part is going to be the same. You're able to run the same types of courses of fire with similar interactions. So you're running the gun roughly the same as you would be.
Depends on which one you buy.
Yeah.
Like from my perspective, what I see at matches, probably the most common PCC is a Ruger.
Right.
Which is a great gun.
Yeah. but it's not an AR type manual of arms.
Not even close.
No, it's similar to an AK.
No, it's a 1022.
Yeah, it's a scaled.
It's a 1022 manual.
I thought about that forever. I was like, it's a 1022, and then I remembered that the Ruger PC9 was a police gun forever.
I got that safety, the tandem cross one. Thank you.
They're nice, aren't they?
Yeah, it's wicked.
That's awesome.
I haven't upgraded the safety on mine. I probably should.
You guys need to get some
Parts
of those.
are coming.
You guys need to get some of those Jawbone mag releases for the PC carbine.
All right.
Yeah, check that out.
Because that puts that gun somehow back in the correct ergonomics.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I don't know
other than not having a hold open.
I don't know when
when
the original PC9s were kind of thought up, and because they were issued to police, they were the police carbine 9. That's where it came from.
And the
original wood stock and
Alberta Fish and Wildlife had some of them as well.
Oh, okay.
They had suppressed ones.
Yeah. I only ever saw them in the 1995 buyer's guide or whatever. I never saw one in the flesh until I saw the ones now.
Because they never made an 18-inch version. They never made an 18 and a half. Those were only ever built to an American spec. So they all came into the country with 16-inch barrels, therefore were restricted, therefore didn't have the market
probably
that a non-restricted one does.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Are there any guns that you have banned from use? Have you ever seen anything come onto the competition circuit where you just said, no, this is unsafe or this is unreasonable to shoot? Has anybody showed up with anything?
Oh, you mean like you're not talking about something that's been prohibited?
No, not something illegal, but just
mean
something
that was banned from competition just because it was dangerous. Maybe not guns. I'll let Steve can take that. But I remember the first 3-gun match. We were all from a training background, and we're all running slings on our rifles. So there's things that there was certainly some growing instances.
Oh yeah, it's been a growing. But as far as specific guns,
yeah, I'm just being. Has anybody shown up with something so off the wall that you've been like, no, you can't use that?
Normally, if they have something bizarre, they'll ask ahead of time.
Right.
The one I can think of that we don't permit is a Tokarev for a pistol.
Of course,
yeah, because it has no external safeties. There's no,
which is not necessarily a deal breaker, because you could have it holstered, hammer down on an empty chamber.
Yes.
So you could draw it and go. And you could lock it open and empty to put it down in a safe condition. Right. So you could work with it. The trouble is most of them are in 7.62 Toke, and that's fast and steel jacketed.
Steel core.
And I don't want that on my steel at 10 yards or 12 yards, right?
100%.
Because it's a little ricochet-ish.
Yep.
And I've seen those Tokarevs. You don't know what you're getting buying those old surplus guns. I've seen a few of them that have a loose sear, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And they'll shoot a little faster than others.
They're terrible guns.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an NKVD agent and you need to act as a blocking detachment in 1941, they're fantastic.
Or if you need to shoot deserters in the back of the head.
That's what I'm talking about. Exactly.
Yeah. That's what it was made for.
Yeah.
But as a competition gun,
garbage.
Terrible.
Yeah.
We don't, the people up here have adjusted.
Yeah.
Whether that means they don't come out or whether it means they buy something appropriate for today. We actually had more new shooters last year than we've had in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
A lot of that was due to people lending out handguns, because these are younger guys that are getting into it. They can buy a rifle, or a long gun or a PCC. They can buy a 1022.
Yep.
And they can buy a shotgun, but they can't get a pistol.
Right.
But, I mean, imagine around the group, there's just a fair number of pistols, so people don't mind lending once in a while. So we've had new guys come out with doing that. I know at the Genesee range, the Chaz range, Canadian Historical Arms Society there, they have a division now that is rifle shotgun.
Yeah, I actually talked to a customer. He came into the shop, the first sanctioned rifle IPSC match.
Yeah, I saw that. Calgary next year?
Yeah. Well, no, they just had one here. And I guess, so now, and it was all rifles. So I think cool. The sport will continue to evolve. It's not going anywhere. It's going to keep changing, but it's just unfortunate that it's always under.
I imagine a scenario where it's shotguns.
Yeah.
Or 22s.
Pump shotguns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're back to shooting clays.
You're doing whatever. We got a lot of shotgun stuff. We got a lot of steel. We got a lot of circus props or circus targets.
Sure.
So you can still have an entertaining amount of fun with it. It's just that shotguns are a love-hate thing for people competitively.
Yeah.
Because it's not like when everybody's on the same page, everybody's shooting the same kind of shotgun. Whether it's as long as it's a tube-fed gun, right? Because I don't know, there might be a couple of mag-fed ones that are still permissible.
A few.
But we don't see those because they're not necessarily great guns.
They're junk.
Mag-fed semis, that is. There are mag-fed pumps out there that are decent. But it's primarily a reloading competition. Like if you can shoulder the gun on your shoulder solidly and pump the pump, then what changes things is how fast you can reload, which is one of the changes from when you started shoot, or maybe the last time you did. You get your dump pouch
because I could load double. Yeah, well, no, I was like Invictus Practical. I could load doubles. I couldn't do quads because my hands are too screwed up.
Never do quads,
but I could load doubles. Yeah, for sure, and that's kind of about where that was the high end of like gear for the pump guns, and then guys started showing up with the semis and the.
Well, now you've got John Wick doing quad reloads on the big screen. I mean, that tends to take things up a notch in both gear, because now people are looking at seeing something in the movies and saying, okay, what gear is that? What are they running? What shotguns are they running? What shell holders are they running? Yeah. And that just ups that game considerably. So if you can afford it and you can spend the time to train, you can get pretty damn fast.
We still have the different divisions as well, right? There's still an open division. You can have a tube-fed pump gun that's got 16 rounds in it.
Yep.
Like that's legit and legal.
Yep.
Or you can have a mag-fed pump gun, like a Mossberg 590M or something. You could have a 20-round magazine. You could have 21 rounds in the gun.
Yeah.
Which, other than on our one stage where we can only put shotgun on it, you're never going to have to reload that gun unless you've got some weird slug action going on in between birdshot.
Right.
But there are lots of options out there. But it is primarily a reloading type game.
Sure.
And these days, if you're, like you said, if you're not doing at least twins, you're going to be slow. If you're loading out of a dump pouch like we did in 2008.
Well, back in the day, but that's what we knew because that's how we were trained. We're classically trained, I would say.
But that's all that there was.
Yeah.
Like I remember coming back I went to SHOT Show with a couple of friends in 2010, and I came back with these California Competition Works belt pouches.
Yeah.
They held 4 shotgun rounds vertically. If your hands were big enough, you could grab all 4 out and go 4 rounds into the gun.
Yeah.
That was revolutionary.
Sure.
Because we were all coming out of dump pouches and Canadian Tire bandoliers. People are looking like Pancho Villa out there with all the...
Well, I remember going from a dump pouch to a shotgun chest rig where instead of like reaching into this random bag of shells and they were like, who knows which fucking way they were facing, to having like a SOE chest rig where like, oh my God, they're all aligned the same way. Like, look at how fast this is.
Yeah.
We were so dinosaur, man.
But that's all that there was.
Sure, it was the best at the time.
It was the best there was. And shotguns probably come along faster.
Yeah.
Like as far as if you want to look at just straight up times for any particular guns, like in regular divisions, not necessarily open, the shotgun has got the fastest.
Yeah.
And that's not even so much to do with the gun. It's got like more to do with the loading method.
Yeah, the manual of arms has changed.
Although in like 2019,
a whole bunch,
which was kind of like when we hit our peak, maybe the year before, when we had like 13 matches in the league one year. The guys with the shotgun, like the mag-fed shotguns, oh my God. Like, they're so fast.
Yep.
Like that's when because prior to them, people were kind of in our league at least anyways. My perspective on 3-gun in the country is pretty small. It's limited to the Peace Country and a few matches in Edmonton. So when they had when people were in open, they were in it incidentally. They had a ported barrel on their shotgun. They had a break on their pistol. They didn't have 3 open guns. But when people were coming along and starting to get set up, and all of a sudden there's guys with 3 open guns.
Yeah, everybody's building race guns.
You know, they're shooting a comped red dotted pistol.
Yeah,
with a well comped, well balanced, well thought out AR, and they're shooting a mag-fed shotgun. That's when you started to see that massive spread in times between open and the
Yeah, because I remember being in open class because there was a light on my pistol. I was like, well, I only have one holster. And so if I don't have this light on here, I can't even stick it in this holster, so I'm an open class.
Yeah.
None of my guns were open class guns. I mean,
Right.
And that drew out of like when we made up the rule set.
Yeah.
We just literally made up the rule set. We stole most of it from USPSA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular one had to do with, I think it was one particular guy that had taken his light and filled it with brass.
Right,
So
to
it
give
was
himself a bunch
it
of
was
counterweight
solid.
on the front
It was
of
a
the gun.
counterweight to keep
Right.
muzzle flip. He didn't have a break on the pistol, and it had a light, but it wasn't a light. It was a counterweight.
Yeah.
So that particular rule of ours goes
Okay.
back to avoiding the counterweight to keep you out of open.
It's amazing what people cheat at.
We just always wanted to have everybody on an even playing field.
You want it to be fun, right? And some guys are going to come in to compete, and they're going to be good competitors. They're going to be there to be the best, and that's awesome. But as I mean, in the competitions that I've shot in here and in Peace River, it's always been about having fun, about being safe first and foremost, because everybody's buddy checking everybody else and making sure that everybody's, finger off the trigger, everything's unloaded, everything's where it should be. But at the same time, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of nobody's there to break world records. Everybody's there to have a good time, though.
Because we're shooting in Peace River.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end of the road.
Sure.
So, I mean, I won. Okay, great. The pond was pretty small. You're the big fish. Cool.
Yeah.
Everybody's competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to do as best they can. But a lot of them are like, yeah, okay, I didn't practice since the last team match. I haven't shot a match in a year. I'm pretty happy with my performance.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to do well, but coming out and shooting and the community and the group, for me, certainly, is more important than the actual match now. Like, I organize it so I can shoot. That's what then going back to the very first match I organized. I wanted to shoot it. I wanted to shoot.
Right.
And I didn't want to do it by myself. So we guess we have to have a match. So we have to organize something. But now, particularly since all the COVID stuff and since all the OIC stuff and since everything's gotten weird, the community's become that much more important because the people that have continued to come out are dedicated. And they are, without a doubt, the best people I know that I've ever met in any one group. They're 100%. And I include you guys in that as well because we've shot together. The people I've met in the firearms community and the 3-gun community are the best people I know.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
Bar none. Like, I don't know. Everybody can pick a number in their head for I like to call it the asshole ratio. Like, how many people do you meet during the day that would fall in that group? Is it a 10%? Is it whatever? Ooh. But
it depends on the guy, I guess.
But I know when I'm at a match in Peace River, that number is vanishingly small. It is zero.
Yeah,
on most
it's
events.
Basically non-existent.
Correct.
Yeah. All those every team match that I ever shot was probably each one was just better and better, and the community. You got guys driving from all over the goddamn place to come up, and they're like, "Yeah, this is the only match I shoot. I come up every year because I want to see my friends." Yep. Like it's that tight knit. It's a cool thing, man. It's wild.
Well, Jay drives up from Wainwright every year, right? Sure
does.
Yeah. And we get people out of BC. We get people from GP, obviously.
Yeah.
We got a lot of guys out of Chaz this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
It is because we've had a few shooters from down there come up, shoot with us, and then they pimp the hell out of it because they have such a good time.
Yeah.
Because the shooting is important. It's why we're there.
The trash talking is just as important.
But it's
Team
not
Gunja might be making a comeback.
It's not the most important thing. Like when you can come out and, if you walk off the stage with a broken shotgun because something happened, you'll have 6 offers before you get it back to the.
Hey, look, man! I remember shooting that one stage, and my rifle went down, and I'm shooting an NEA 15 at the time, and that one was good. And
really?
I'm sitting there trying to clear the malfunction, and you're like, "Hey, stop, man! Your bolt's broken." And I'm like, "What?" I flip it over and look. The bolt is broken in my gun.
Weird.
I immediately get 37 offers. Use my rifle. Use my rifle. Sarge is like, "Hold on, I'll just get you a new bolt." He goes over, opens a toolbox, shiny Colt bolt, back in the gun. Hey, we'll let you reshoot the stage. No big deal. Like the amount of community and generosity that's in there. 100%, man.
And we get a lot of new people out too.
Yeah.
And we get more and more ladies out every year as well.
Yeah, I see that. I see that on your guys' Facebook page. And there's some of the bigger, they're really pushing the matches. They're out there putting out pictures. They're commenting. Like, that's the kind of thing that drives things forward is getting that kind of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fantastic to see.
Well, I mean, I think 4 out of the last 5 years I've shot with Heather.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're not the fastest when we're shooting together, but she is just the best. She is the best person to shoot with.
Yeah.
Because we have fun.
Yeah.
And she's too hard on herself sometimes because we're there to have a good time. But
yeah, it is a competition.
We do great. And I wouldn't want, I'd rather shoot with her. I mean, my kid won't even shoot with me, right? I mean, he has to shoot with Jay, so.
Well, they've been teammates for a long time.
They have.
So there's that bond.
They have.
I got a question for you, and it's something I've been trying to figure out for quite a while. The first course I took, I'm pretty sure it was the first course I took, was tactical response.
Okay.
And Connor was there.
He was 11.
Shooting with a modified, like some kind of modified 22.
1022, wasn't
Okay, so that would have been in 2011.
Okay.
That would have been in 2011. And
Yep.
that was a 1022 he shot that
he? Yeah.
class with.
And he was 11 at the time,
He was
wasn't he?
12.
He was 12. That's
Okay.
right.
He was 12 because he had taken fighting pistol the previous year.
That's right. Yeah.
Awesome.
I probably have a picture on my phone somewhere. It's him shooting a Glock 19 on that course,
Yeah.
one-handed
Yeah.
at 11.
Yeah.
It's my rebuttal picture to Glocks don't fit my hand.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there's a picture you showed me. I mean, I was standing there anyways. I saw it happen in real time. But I just remember Connor shooting one of the stages and Jay is like, fuck yeah. And I mean, Jay Gibson.
Yeah.
And I just remember Connor, the look on his face, like the smile almost cracked his head in half, like to get that praise from a Marine.
Yeah.
Right. And it was wild, man. He had such a good time.
No, I think that was a big deal to him.
It was, man. And he represented, like, he was just like, he got treated like everybody else.
Yep.
Like, you got all these, he was definitely the youngest. I think the next youngest guy was probably in his late 20s or early 30s. And here's this kid shooting and
he got invited back for the advanced courses too.
Yes.
Both times.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah, no, I just remember that first course, and there was a lot of firsts on that weekend. And I just remember, here I am. I was really new to firearms and shooting. Definitely a fish out of water. And here I'm watching this like young kid just burn it down on some of these stages, and I'm like, I got a long way to go.
Well, he was so small. He was wearing my elbow pads for knee pads.
yeah.
Yep. Oh, that's awesome, man.
And
Yeah.
I mean, he's shot since. I think he was 13 when he shot his first 3-gun match. And he shot every team match with various number of partners.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I mean, that's how things stay alive, right? You're bringing your kids into it. You're showing them the sport. You're showing them that activity, that level of responsibility that comes with, firearms ownership, firearms use,
Mm-hmm.
and then bringing that into the next generation. Now we're going to have another generation that's coming that's not going to have access like we did, and that's going to be interesting for them to navigate that. But I always think about it as, in Japan, there is no firearms ownership, but they have like the biggest milsim airsoft industry in the world. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be a hunger for it. And I think as if it can be brought out with proper instruction and given a good outlet for, good creative use like competition, because people say, well, what's the value in competition? Like, what's the purpose of employing firearms in competition? Because 3-gun, pistol, rifle, shotgun, off the top does come from police and military tactics in a competition setting. And a lot of people get, it's tough for them to wrap their minds around. So, well, you watch the Summer Olympics? Well, yeah. Well, all of the Summer Olympic sports and a good chunk of the winter ones are all
martial skills.
They're all at one point military skills. That's what we're training. That's the purpose of it. It's a skill that you learn that you're pushing to a higher level than somebody else. Nobody's pole vaulting over anybody's city walls anymore, or throwing a, spear at a boar, because we can't in Alberta because people are dumb. I mean, we could, 10 years ago, you could hunt bear with a spear, but you can't anymore.
Did they actually change that?
Yep. They banned it after outrage because a guy posted a Facebook video of himself.
Yeah.
So we don't have...
It is the age of outrage.
It is.
If you're not outraged, you're doing it wrong.
The competitive shooting is valuable to anybody. Just because, especially you want from firearms proficiency angle, from being able to use them should you need to, being able to use them under pressure, because there is pressure. Mm-hmm. The beep goes off and your plan goes out your head. But it's not necessarily that one in particular that teaches those skills about being responsible and moving up. Like if you pick anything, teach your kid to woodwork. He'll earn a respect for tools, which is exactly the same as you learn when you shoot. It's a tool. It does a particular thing. It turns money into noise, and
very well
sends a little thing downrange that, as Paul Gomez used to say, every bullet's got a little tiny lawyer attached to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't take that seriously, there are consequences.
Yeah.
So it is a good to society for someone to be a proficient shooter. Like it's a good to society for them to be a proficient driver, or have some first aid skills so they can help out somebody that's seen a car accident. I mean, there's it's not an ill to society. It's been demonized, and no matter what we say, we can't fight uphill against it.
No.
Because they will always say you don't need it.
Yeah, it's the same old arguments.
So. Yeah. There's always a level of technophobia that goes into it that I find is kind of funny. Techno-tyranny, because they'll say, well, you can't have military arms. Well, every Mauser action is a military arm. What you're afraid of is modern firearms. They'll say, well, we're going to ban the VZ-858. This was invented in 58. So this thing is 80 years old, but it's modern enough to meet the banning modern firearms. But it's like, no. What you're saying is there is a level of technology that is unsafe, and by unsafe, it's a possible threat to power for the average person to own, because there's no limits on what the police or the military can own. We don't put restrictions on them saying that's too advanced or that'll kill too many people at one time.
Shit, they don't even have to have a license.
Exactly. You can pass a minor proficiency test once a year.
I think most of all this shit could be fixed with education. I think it's too common sense. Like if you were wanting to be involved in any kind of firearms legislation or regulation, you should have to be a valid PAL holder. You want to take the mystery out of it for kids? Well, let's just rewind a few years and make firearms instruction or training, make it mandatory in school. I'm not saying you have to pursue it and go whatever, but hey, we made you play volleyball and you didn't like it. Now you're in an education class, so you're going to learn about firearms to demystify it, so it's not this weird, crazy, taboo thing. You could fix all of this with education. Nobody wants to go.
When I was in grade 7, we did a hunter ed course.
Yep.
And the teacher that taught it, he was a big shooter. Hunter, trap shooter, shot skeet, did all those things. So I'm 13, 14 years old. He says to me one day, hey, your dad's got this, and this, right? Could you bring those to school tomorrow for hunter ed? I'm like, yeah, you bet. So I hop on the bus the next morning with a Mosin Nagant Model 9130 and a Lee Enfield No. 4.
Fantastic.
In cases. Take them to the bus, or on the bus to school. Mm-hmm. I got a note from the teacher. He's like,
yeah.
It was a non-event.
Yeah, nobody batted an eye.
Everybody went shooting. Everybody did their thing. And we were handled live guns in class. Oh, the humanity. It wasn't a deal. It wasn't a big deal. But that's a different age now.
Yeah.
I think nothing bores a child more than putting it into an educational setting. And on the whole topic of quote unquote gun control, education is the only tool that fixes it. So if we're going to make something mandatory, why isn't education mandatory? Why isn't firearms instruction, if it's a problem, if it's dangerous, why isn't that mandatory?
My brother-in-law and his wife were visiting one time, and we were talking about it, and I was showing my guns to him and stuff, and he was like, she happened to walk past the room. It's like, oh my God, you own that? Why do you need that? What are you going to do with that? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, because I like to shoot him at the range. She had a little moment, kind of went off on me. And later that day I said to her, look, it's okay to have an opinion. I don't mind that you have an opinion, but you should have an opinion from a point of information. So I said, why don't you come out to the range tomorrow with us? Give it a try. You can see it from my point of view. Didn't like that at all. But the next morning as we're packing up, she's like, okay, you're right.
Okay.
I should have an opinion based on information. At the end of the day, she's hammering slugs out of my shotgun and double tapping with my AR-15.
Yeah.
Had a great time. Never went and bought a gun. She never had any intention of going to buy a gun or getting a firearms license or any of those things.
No.
But she had more information to make an opinion on.
Mm-hmm. And
people don't do that. People don't seek out information on something that they have that strong of an opinion about. They don't go to the quad rally to see what sort of environmental damage that's actually being done. They just have an opinion on it because they saw a picture on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't know what shooting is about or why somebody would enjoy it because they've never done it and will not do it because they are comfortable in their own knowledge, which is zero.
Sure.
Other than what they've seen in media of various sorts.
Yeah. I mean, we see the same thing with hunting.
Yeah.
Those virulent anti-hunters.
Yeah.
They don't know that conservation is led by hunters and groups that represent hunters. They don't understand where environmentalism, some of the biggest environmentalists are hunters because people spend their time on the land. So yeah, there's definitely
there's no hunters out there that want to see all the game disappear.
No.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real.
Yeah.
But if people would just, obviously I'm delving into fantasy land now. If people would have opinions based on knowledge firsthand and not just what somebody else is telling them they should feel about it, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
And that goes for many, many, many different things. That's certainly not related solely to firearms.
Yeah. So you've had a long career in I guess not necessarily in aviation, but peripheral to aviation. So you've worked for as an air traffic controller?
No. I am a flight service specialist.
What does that mean? Break it down for us, Steve. We're going to switch gears here.
You're not serving drinks on the flights.
I've heard that one. Yeah. Okay. So in Canada, at any kind of airport where you see a tower,
right,
you're going to see two different kinds of people. The bigger places will typically have air traffic controllers, and they, like the job title says, control. They are responsible.
Ooh, nice.
Whoa. Sorry.
All good.
That was just about bad. They control. They tell the airplanes what to do. A flight service specialist. We work for the same employer. I work for Nav Canada. Before that, I worked for Transport Canada.
Right.
They privatized it in 96. So the company basically owns itself.
Okay.
It's a private, not-for-profit, non-share capital corporation.
I'm not sure I understand, but go on.
Yes, it owns itself is basically what it means. And it has a board of trustees and stakeholders that represent government, industry, the employees, private aviation, stuff like that.
Okay.
So controllers control. And you'll see those at typically busier places. Now, that might be a cutoff line somewhere around 75, 80,000 movements a year.
Oh, okay.
Maybe a little bit less. Flight service specialist provides an advisory function. So I relay them all of the same information that a controller would give, but then they're responsible for what they do with that information.
So you're not assigning runways or landing patterns for various flights?
No, I'm telling them which runway is best for them to use based on traffic or the wind, things like that, or their direction of flight or things like that. I will suggest that. I will tell them where the traffic is. I will, give them information about the weather and the runway condition and things like that. I will make sure they understand where the other traffic is and that they don't run into each other. But it's all in an advisory function.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So what got you into that line of work? Was it just an interest in planes? Like got you into like, I mean, I grew up with a vast interest in aviation, but I grew up in a town with no airport. So
I love airplanes. So, when I was a kid, I was making model airplanes. I was watching, I had tons of model
You got to meet
airplane
my younger
books.
brother.
Actually, I was at university. I was in my second year.
okay.
I had changed from BCom to a Bachelor of Science in Geography, and that was going nowhere. And my roommate and I were sitting in French class, not paying attention, listening to the girl beside us who was telling us about her brother who had gone and wrote this aptitude test for Transport Canada. And me and him said, let's go give it a try.
Sure.
Why not? This isn't like, I don't know where I would have ended up with that degree. Starbucks or whatever.
Probably teaching.
Working at the Zellers, running the cafe. I don't know. So we both went down there. We wrote the aptitude test. I wrote the test for the air traffic controller and flight service specialist. He wrote both of them as well. I got a call back interviews for both. I went to the air traffic controller one after working a 12-hour midnight shift at the steel mill in the summer there. Failed it. Never got a call. I got a call just before I was supposed to go back to school that fall. And they said, you want to go off to Cornwall, Ontario and train for this? And I'm like, yeah, you bet.
Cool.
Let me cancel my school. He ended up down there at school for an air traffic controller position just after I got there.
Okay.
And so that was in September of '89.
And so did you always live in Peace River, or did you just end up there?
No, Peace River is the farthest south I've been since I got a job I got my job.
Okay.
So it was a 7-month training course in Cornwall, Ontario, which is as terrible as it sounds. But the school had a bar. You could buy Canadian beer for $1 a bottle. You were 10 minutes from the border. We'd go to Messina, New York, because a bunch of us had driven out.
Okay.
So there was enough cars in the class to move people around. We had people in our class from all over the country. So it was 7 months down there. They taught us, the basics of the job, like how to basically do the job. Like there was simulators for everything. I'm also a certified weather observer. That's part of the job.
Right.
So we would observe in the dark and the daylight, using all the exact same equipment. So I got out of there and they said, where do you want to go? And all you people from what was then Western region in Transport Canada, you're going north. You're going north of 60.
Oh, wow.
There's no way you're not going north of 60. The only question is how terrible of a place you're going to go to. Like, is it going to have a road or is it not going to have a road?
Right.
So they said you can
It makes sense because all those communities are fly-in communities.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So back then, say in the NWT, this is pre-Nunavut days. Like Nunavut actually split off, I think, while I was up there. There was flight service stations in Fort Smith and Hay River and Fort Simpson and Norman Wells, Inuvik, Tuck,
Okay.
Coppermine, Cambridge Bay, Rankin Inlet, places like that all around there. So they said, put down on your list where you want to go. We probably won't send you there, so don't be too whatever. So they sent me to Coppermine, which is called Kugluktuk now.
Oh, wow.
That was the sign on the terminal when I got up there, like Coppermine and Kugluktuk. They're just now that's the sign the name on the maps. But everybody called it Coppermine while I was there. So go to Yellowknife, go north till you hit the ocean.
Wow.
And how old are you at this time?
I'm 21 years old.
21, okay.
I'm 21 years old.
So what's up there?
Not much.
Just a collection of small houses, communities?
There was about 1,100 people in Coppermine.
Oh, okay. It's more than I think.
Not really any local industry to speak of. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know how much.
All Inuit?
Yeah. There was about, we counted one night and we figured it was probably about 10-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
From local folks to Southerners. And
I guess everyone's a Southerner when you live up there.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. And it was originally a Hudson's Bay trading post that had the community grow up around it, like most of those places up there.
Yeah.
So rather than the nomadic lifestyle, they would bring their pelts and whatever and whatnot into trade at the bay. And then it sort of settled in around that. But when I was there was a few people that worked for the mine. This is pre-diamond mine days.
Oh, okay.
There was some fly-in, fly-out guys that went to it was a base metal mine of some sort.
Copper?
No, actually, the Coppermine River got its name because the Inuit up there in that area were called the Copper Inuit.
Oh, okay.
And there was native copper laying on the ground.
Yep.
And when the Europeans got up there was a lot of people with copper tools. Like they had copper ulus and stuff, and they thought that there must have been a mine somewhere in the area.
Oh, okay.
But the deposits are such up there that you can find a chunk of copper laying on the ground on the surface that's the size of that beer can.
Yeah.
So that's how the local people and the town and the river got its name. Now, to the best of my recollection, as it was explained to me at the time, I might not be 100% correct on that.
Yeah.
So don't get.
I'm sure one day someone will correct us in the comments of this.
Oh, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But it was an interesting place. Like it was not down south.
Okay.
Like if you think living in small town Alberta prepares you for living north of the Arctic Circle.
I would imagine not. It's like going to another planet.
Very different.
So is it government housing then?
I'm not 100% how that sure worked.
No, for you, I mean.
For us,
so you go up there.
At that point, yeah.
I'm working for fuck? You get off the plane and...
I'm working for Transport Canada.
Okay.
I get off the plane in my high-top Nike white leather running shoes, my leather jacket, and my mirrored sunglasses.
Yeah. In
the spring of 1990. Mm-hmm. There's all the faces in the flight service station window pressed up against them trying to pick out which one is getting off the airplane, which one's me.
Yeah.
They thought they were looking for an East Indian guy because they couldn't understand what my last name, the ethnic, might be.
Oh, I see.
So they're like, it's got to be him. He's wearing running shoes and a leather jacket.
Well,
I was the only one that didn't have a jacket bigger than me.
Yeah.
Which I learned the lesson. Like you wear appropriate gear when you're flying in and out of there.
Yeah.
But that was a beautiful.
How long did you stay up there for?
Almost 3 years.
Oh, okay.
Almost 3 years.
And from there, did you go directly back down to Peace River? Or?
Fort Smith.
Okay.
Fort Smith for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And
this is kind of the needs of Canada transport at the time, I'm guessing, right? Like where they needed somebody, they'd move you to, or?
Your first posting is where they've got the holes. And if you imagine the setup at that time, the region that they staffed was like a funnel, with Inuvik on this end and Rankin Inlet over here, and everything funneling down into Alberta. So all the fresh meat went in on top, and as you got seniority or you built up points towards a transfer by staying in a terrible place, you could work your way south.
Okay.
So I did almost 3 years there.
Do you know if it's still that way?
Pardon me?
Do you know if it's still that way?
Now it's seniority based.
Oh, okay.
And there is way less flight service stations. The company's gotten out of that. It transferred over to what they call a community aerodrome radio station. So it's something administered by the government of the Northwest Territories or the government of Nunavut.
Okay.
And it's primarily local people. I think there might still be some contract places, but I think I would wager that it's mostly.
I was just curious if all of our, your Edmonton International, Calgary International, if all those people have done stints in the north, if that's where they all started out.
Possibly those guys could have been in Yellowknife or Whitehorse, the controllers up there, or they might get sent to Fort McMurray.
Right,
because if you look
at Grand Prairie.
Well, no, that's flight service.
Oh,
it's the same folks here that I do, like the same same tools, if you will.
Yeah,
they're significantly busier than Peace River. Peace River's just died in the last 6-7 years.
Sure. Do you guys do a lot of like forestry, like with the forest fires and stuff like that? Is a lot of that service out of that Peace River?
Nope. A lot of the helicopter actions moved off the field.
Okay.
Or greener pastures, probably. Most of the fixed wing fighting or firefighting aircraft are based in Manning.
Yeah, that's right.
And they always have been.
Okay.
Yep.
So we get some helicopters, depending upon the season. This year, we didn't actually have that many at the airport. We did have some Sikorsky's, some big Sikorsky 64s, the sky cranes.
Okay. Yeah.
Those are big machines.
Yeah.
Like they'll lift your house.
Yeah.
I've been inside them. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're cool. But no, we've ever since the Carmen Creek project that Shell was running east of Peace River, the oil one, since that fell apart in 2016 or 17.
Pretty big decline.
Fell off the.
So you did 2 or 3 years in Fort Smith.
Yeah.
And then where did you go after that?
To here. To
okay,
Peace River.
so then Peace River, and you've been there since.
Been there since November of 1994.
Okay.
I came out of Fort Smith, got married.
Yep.
Went off on our honeymoon, and moved back to Peace River.
Where'd you meet your wife?
Oh, I'm probably gonna embarrass her, aren't I? Where did I meet her?
Yeah, like in Peace River, or did you know her from before?
No, we dated in high school. In Camrose.
So is that? Now we have to keep rewinding. Where'd you grow up?
Camrose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's where I grew up. That's where I'm from.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'm sorry to say, but I was born in Ontario, but I'm not from there. I'm
You're
from
definitely
Alberta.
Same with my wife. She was born in Sarnia, but never lived there really.
Yeah, I'm from Alberta.
Yeah.
My parents moved out when I was 4, and I thank God for that every day. I'd much rather be out here. So grew up there. Cheryl grew up there. She's a local girl.
Yeah.
Met her at a party one time when I was in high school.
So were you guys dating through the whole Steve goes off?
No,
to college?
not at all. Not
Okay.
at all. We dated briefly in high school, and then I dumped her because she was too young to go to the bar.
He's
Noble
heartless,
man.
heartless too.
My goodness.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I was a dick.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
it happens.
there's no question.
It happens.
So we dated a little bit then, and then I went off to university, failed at that, went off to Cornwall, and I always kept running into her at the bank. She'd be home on holidays or whatever, and it was she didn't tell me till years later, but I'd walk into the bank. You know, I've come out of copper mine, so I got hair down to my shoulders. I've had one haircut in the last 6 months, and I'd see her at the till or at the wicket, and I need to get some cash or something because this isn't the old days,
right?
You know, where you had paper checks that you've stacked up for overtime for the last 6 months. You need to deposit them.
Yeah.
And every time I walked into the bank, she'd be there serving a customer, and then she'd disappear. And every time I got to the front of the line, she'd magically be back at her wicket, which I didn't know until years later was intentional because she wanted to talk to me.
There you go.
So there was still a thing there.
Yeah.
And I guess it would have been the summer of 93, a buddy of mine got married. So I came out of Fort Smith. I was in Fort Smith at that time. And I was one of his groomsmen. So we were down in Camrose, and we were at the bar the week before this wedding. And Cheryl picked me up at the bar. And we did a bunch of things when I was out on holidays then. She came up to visit me in Fort Smith a couple of times, drove up.
Oh, that's dedication.
She drove up in her, she drove up in her little she was living in Calgary at that time too.
Oh, wow.
So she drove
driving halfway across the planet.
Drove from Calgary to Fort Smith. She calls me one day in tears. She's stuck on the beach in Fort Resolution. She missed a turn and she's driven off onto the beach, and somebody's just thrown up on her car.
Oh dear.
Fuck.
Yeah, she was dedicated.
Yeah.
She was dedicated. So we wrote letters to each other, you know,
as
back
people
in those
did.
days, as people used to do.
Yeah.
Or I'd phone her and she'd know it was me before call display. I'd hang up so she could call me back at 20 cents a minute instead of $1.50 that Northwest charged. And I mean, after we met that one summer, we were married 2 Octobers later. So like 14 months later.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a whirlwind. And so we've been married since.
Yeah. You guys settled up in Peace River for the last how long?
Since the November of 94. So it's almost been 30 years there.
Yeah.
And it was never supposed to be home.
Yeah,
you always imagine getting closer back to central Alberta at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're going to end up back in Red Deer or somewhere bigger or whatever. And then, you know, we had the kids and they got settled in and It's like, no, it
Yeah, you put down roots.
It turned into home somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't know how or when that actually happened.
Yeah.
But it did.
Just that slow organic growth.
Yeah, that, and I hate moving.
Yeah.
Like nobody likes
it's
moving,
one of the worst things I think you can do.
Yeah, it's stressful.
You start looking around your garage and it's like, how am I going to pack this up?
Yeah, exactly. And
I'll let the kids burn it all down when I die later.
There aren't enough dumpsters in the world to fill it all up, right?
Yeah. I know I just moved last year, and after consolidating a couple households into mine, it was rough. I don't want to do it again anytime soon.
I'm not as bad as my dad. I don't have a 5-gallon pail of bent nails that he's going to straighten one day. You know.
Oh, of course.
I mean, he's not that bad, but
the generations before us did it out of necessity because they saw their parents do it.
Exactly.
Right. They saved things and reused things, but we don't. We're at 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I got one burning question. After being a trained observer and staring at the sky for 30 years, you ever seen anything weird? Anything you couldn't explain up there?
In the sky?
Yeah.
I mean, other than the chemtrails?
Sure, let's at least leave those out. That's obvious.
That's not a thing. No.
No?
No. I've seen weird things on the ground. I've seen airplanes do weird things, but I've never seen anything I would rate as a UFO.
Nothing you couldn't explain off of from what you're, because that's what I'm curious about is the difference between the layman who's just looking at the sky. He might as well be a primitive person 10,000 years ago when it comes to looking at the sky, as opposed to somebody who's a trained observer who sees meteors or aircraft or weather and can ascribe these things to being something, as opposed to somebody who doesn't. I mean, if you're staring at radar all day and you're staring at the sky all day or all night, then I find you're less likely to misinterpret things.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Or at the same time, possibly, you might be more likely to discount them.
Okay.
Because you're familiar with something and you're not actually looking for anything.
Yeah, so you'll have a normalcy bias that's going to
it certainly could be
a predilection
too. That's a thing.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But have I ever gone, oh, wow, that's crazy? No.
Never had a coworker say like, hey man, I saw something last night I couldn't explain?
Not that was aviation related, no.
Oh, that's cool. And for me, I ask because I have an interest in all things unexplained.
Yeah.
And to talk to somebody who's a credible observer, who falls under that, hey, I look and stare at the scope, I see the radar all day long. I make sure that things in the air are where they're supposed to be in the air.
But radar doesn't work that way in this country anymore.
How do you mean?
What we use primarily for a surveillance tool is what's called secondary surveillance radar.
Okay.
Aircraft have transponders.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You can set a squawk code in it, and then on the radar it'll display your call sign, your altitude, your airspeed if you have the correct mode of transponder. So an SSR radar or a surveillance display, because we don't use the word radar anymore.
Okay.
Because it's not necessarily a display that's only based on radar. So it's interrogating the transponder. It's not skin painting the airplane.
Right.
That would be a primary radar.
Okay.
And that, while that capability still exists, it's not the tool we're seeing. So
Gotcha.
If somebody flies overhead a Peace River at 7,000 feet and they don't have a transponder on, I'm not going to see them.
Okay, that makes sense. So those apps where you can track flights.
That's solely based on transponder.
Okay.
And that's not coming through the secondary surveillance system network. That's coming through
GPS?
Specific ground-based transponder reading units.
Gotcha.
To the best of my knowledge. I think you can go to FlightAware and host one of their things in your house.
Oh, really?
I think that's a thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what's the radius of say Peace River? You got Steve sitting in the tower. What's the radius you're looking at?
That I can see on the display?
Yeah, that you're sort of aware of. That's your general is it 100 kilometers? Is it 200?
Well, the space that I'm specifically responsible for is called the mandatory frequency area. And it's 5 nautical mile radius up to 3,000 feet above ground level centered on the airport.
Okay.
That's the area I am 100, like everybody that comes in, it has to talk to me.
Yep.
I talk to everybody in that area. And then there's squish outside that, right? You know, somebody departs 10 minutes ago and you talk to somebody that's 20 miles inbound.
Yep.
You'll pass them to each other. Even though I'm not necessarily responsible for that space, I'm still responsible for making sure airplanes don't run into each other.
Sure.
So that's the kind of space I'm responsible for. As far as what I can see on the display, on the surveillance display, the radar is in Beaver Lodge.
Okay.
Right, because that's where the old NORAD radar, now it's weather radar, but it's still the same radar.
But it's not.
Right?
It's NAV Canada's radar as well.
Okay, because I assumed it was just the same radar, where they just decommissioned the military use of it.
I don't know if they can skin paint out of that one or not.
Okay.
I don't know how it works there. Like, I mean, that's a totally different department. I just look at the stuff that's in front of me.
Right.
Some of it I don't know how it works. It's magic, pixies, you know, and stuff. But so the radar there is limited by, obviously, over-the-horizon issues. So somebody inbound from Grand Prairie to Peace River, I can see them most of the way. Like if you're tooling along with your buddy in his Cessna 172, and you're at 5,500 feet above ground, and you're coming to Peace River, I'll probably see you until about 10 or 15 miles southwest of Peace River. And then you'll go below the radar horizon.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So if you're higher,
gotcha.
I can see you farther north.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there I can't see you. But there is a new system called ADS-B. Don't ask me the acronym. It's out there. It's NAV Canada's actually put up a satellite constellation or piggybacked on satellites, and they can do it space-based now. So it's not fully in place, and you need a different kind of transponder than the standard one. But you'll be able to see people on the ground from space-based interrogation of the transponders.
Okay.
So like we do Dawson Creek as well for 16 hours a day. We do Fort McMurray Tower overnight. When the tower closes, we do that airspace there overnight as well.
Okay.
McMurray's got a radar co-located with the airport, so I can see people on the ground. Like when on-course taxiing, I can see them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Grand Prairie, or it's the Dawson Creek, because once again, they're down low, there's a system at Fort St. John, because the radar coverage at Fort St. John isn't great from the Beaver Lodge radar. They've got a system called MLAT, multilateration. It's a ground-based transponder interrogation system. So between that and the Beaver Lodge radar, I can see people down to about 1,000 feet above ground at Dawson Creek.
Yeah.
Which is helpful.
Yeah.
Whereas Peace River, I got binoculars.
You ever see anything flying around out there? They're like, why are those guys out here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You see odd call signs or airplanes might be
belong
related.
To some other country or?
No, not another country.
Okay.
But say RCMP aircraft, for example.
Sure.
There's not that many of them. And it's not hard after 33 years to know most of their call signs. So you can see them out sometimes, some places stooging around,
circling one area.
Why are they over here doing this?
Yeah.
Don't know. Maybe they're looking for a missing person.
Training. Who knows?
Maybe they're out there in the dark with their FLIR looking for grow ops. Maybe they're doing a takedown. I mean, but that's I mean, as far as weird.
You get any military aircraft?
Occasionally.
U.S. stuff heading north to Alaska or?
Helicopters, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
From the Americans. Like, we'll often see Blackhawks or Chinooks a couple times a year.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll go, Fort St. John or Dawson Creek and then to GP. Sometimes they come over to Peace River. Not 100% sure why they deviate those days. Maybe it's weather over to the west. I'm not sure.
You get them stopping for gas.
Yeah, they stop for gas. Maybe they overnight.
Yeah.
Like we had a Chinook stop in, like 3 Chinooks, American U.S. Army, a couple of years back, and one of them had blown a windshield out while they were flying.
Oh shit!
Damn, Canada geese, man.
They're like, this is a little windy.
Yeah.
So we need to stop and figure out get this fixed up.
Yeah. Uncle Sam got to send him a replacement.
I'm not sure what they did.
Cardboard duct tape.
Maybe they put it back in and duct taped it back together. Yeah. But those are big machines.
Yeah, that's cool.
And fast too.
Yeah.
Chinooks are really fast.
Yeah.
Like when they're flying along with Apaches, the Apaches have to slow down, or the Chinooks have to slow down so the Apaches can keep up.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. So we can find you through your the 3 Mighty Peace 3-gun website?
We don't have a website.
Or
it's all
Facebook page?
I'm old. I don't Instagram. I don't TikTok.
That's okay. Instagram would ban all your stuff anyway.
Probably.
Yeah, for sure. Because all of our content, like for the range,
gun related,
it's anything gun related gets suppressed. So
really,
you're
on
always
Instagram.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I didn't know they.
You can see it if you're subscribed to our page.
Yeah.
Or if you follow us, but it'll never pop up as.
Yeah.
It won't show up in your feed if you're not subscribed to it.
Yeah, it gets suppressed, and that's an open secret now. I don't even think it's a secret now because everybody in the gun industry all has Instagram pages, and they all still create Instagram content, full knowing that nobody outside of their subscribers will ever see it.
But it's probably an odd community in that people will go looking for them.
Yes, so that's where it succeeds. Is it's slow organic growth.
Yeah.
It's,
I would imagine Facebook does something similar. You're not just gonna.
It's owned by the same people.
Yeah, thumb through Facebook and run across your guys' Facebook page without looking for it. So.
No, Mighty Peace 3 Gun.
Yeah.
On Facebook is where to find us.
Awesome. Right on. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That's been awesome.
Yeah, we did 2 hours, 40 minutes with a 10-minute break in the middle. We'll catch that in editing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Steve.
Anytime.
Right. Thanks. And this is the Gray Range Podcast. Out.